Chapter 948. When the golden wind and jade do met, it was better than countless things in the human world. When Chu Qingyin pressed herself against him, the two of them were slightly shocked. Then their cold lips began to burn with sparks flying everywhere, making their blood boil. When they were young, their feelings were hazy and beautiful. And when they were young, their feelings were warm and charming. When their fingers were tightly intertwined, they were unwilling to separate. The young and tender feeling was beautiful and charming, seducing people's souls. And that pair of clear and moist eyes were so bright. The combination of enchanting and pure made people unable to control themselves. His hand slid down from her shoulder to her waist, slowly bringing her closer to him. The hand on her chest moved, and the two of them trembled slightly. In front of her, his dark eyes were like pearls in the night, shockingly bright, like a whirlpool. When they met, she couldn't help being sucked in. His black hair was tied up high, and at this time, it fell to the side with his body. A few strands fell into her collar, itching and numbing. She didn't know when the hand on her chest had moved to her chin. With a gentle lift, she couldn't help but endure the torrential storm of kisses that rained down on her. At this time, their lips were burning hot. The two of them panted and retreated. However, people instinctively wanted more, especially when they saw themselves in each other's eyes. They found that there was no room for anything else between the two of them. Lowering their heads, or moving closer, lingering, they were already reluctant to separate. They didn't know how much time had passed, but when they were together with the person they cared about, it was as if time was just a snap of a finger. The sun slowly set in the west, and its shadow slowly swayed through the window, falling on the two of them, as if it was plated with a faint golden light. The warm atmosphere was just right, giving the two people who knew that they should stop another beautiful reason to continue. The heat wave seemed to want to burn her to ashes. In front of her, other than his clear eyes, there was also a large expanse of gorgeous fireworks. In the end, his hands slowly came out of her clothes. He restrained his restless heart and helped her tidy up her clothes with difficulty. The time wasn't right. Her body was still injured, so he couldn't only care about himself. Chu Qingyin slumped against him, her hands resting loosely on his shoulders. She panted as she looked at the fine beads of sweat on his forehead. She knew that a man who could stop himself at the last moment must have very strong self-control. Sometimes she admired the big ice cube's self-control, but sometimes she felt sorry for him. As a modern woman, although she didn't belong to the bold and unrestrained faction, she wasn't a stubborn person. If she had decided on someone, she wouldn't mind. But in the big ice cube's view, he couldn't do this unless it was their wedding day. Otherwise, it wouldn't be proper and it would be disrespect to her. This made her very moved. What difference? Cough, cough. She didn't dare to think about it anymore. Otherwise, the heat that had gone down with great difficulty would rise again. She raised her head to admire the beautiful man in front of her. Her eyes still had lingering charm. Her normally light pink lips were like burning fireworks, beautiful and moist. Sweat dripped down from his forehead and rolled down his neck to his collar. This appearance was simply seducing people to commit a crime. Her beauty was unique and unparalleled. Unknowingly, she could hook people's hearts. She immediately turned her gaze away, afraid that she would accidentally turn into a wolf. At this time, Xiao Su also didn't feel good. The person in front of him had a red face and her eyes were watery. When she looked at him, it was as if a cat was scratching his heart. It was itchy and stirring his heart. At this time, she turned her face slightly. His gaze just happened to meet her loose collar, and he could see everything inside. He immediately turned his head and looked away, afraid that he wouldn't be able to control himself. He couldn't only care about himself. He still had to care about the little fellow's body. The two of them quietly snuggled up to each other, calming the turbulence in their hearts. Although they didn't say anything, they didn't feel awkward at all. Instead, they felt that such a time was very rare. It was already dusk. When Chu Qingyin felt that her body was fine and her face wasn't so red, she took the initiative to open her mouth. Jin Xian should be on his way now. What did you ask him to do? Before the three armies move, the provisions go first. He will escort the provisions of the 3 armies to the next town. Xiao Su's fingers hooked her hair, twirling it leisurely. The soft hair made his heart as soft as water. Escort the provisions? She blinked, thinking that this task was a little too important. He just entered the army camp. Is it appropriate for him to take on such an important task? The provisions were the support of an army. At the same time, it was also the guarantee for the 2 armies to compete. It was very important. She felt that it was a little risky to let Jean Xian do it. He raised the corner of his mouth. It was the one who said that as long as he was given a chance, he would definitely be able to break out of his own world. I'm just giving him a chance. Whether he can seize it or not, it's up to him. Chu Qingyan weakly raised her hand. This humble one is me. Xiao Su smiled and stroked her long hair. His black eyes flashed. Jean Xian is using the excuse of escorting the provisions as a bait. She was slightly surprised. She hadn't participated in their meetings for a few days and didn't know where they were now. When she heard this, although she was worried about Jean Xian's trip, she was more expectant, because she believed that the big ice block didn't need to use any tricks. If he used a trick, it would definitely hit the nail on the head. There was no need to worry too much. But when he started to talk and she listened with great interest, he didn't mention it again. He was really tantalizing. She tilted her head and said softly, "Big ice block, tell me quickly, how did you take back the home ground this time?" The person in front of him had thin eyebrows and was full of smiles. Her lips were red without any makeup. She was elegant and beautiful. His heart swayed, and he couldn't help but lower his head to give her a light peck on her lips. When he got up, he wasn't surprised to see her puffing out her cheeks and glaring at him with big bright eyes. Her soft red cheeks made her gaze look harmless. He smiled lightly. In her eyes, it was dazzling. She was dazzled for a moment. I've already found the person who leaked the news. Now, I want to use this person to take the initiative to lure the snake out of its hole. The other party can know us like the back of his hand through him and beat us at our own game. Why can't we sow discord and beat them at their own game? He spoke unhurriedly. His tone was light, but there was a faint murderous intent. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and smile. The big ice block rarely argued with people because, in his eyes, those people weren't on the same level. But once he was serious, he was quite scary. This was the so-called don't make a move. Once he made a move, he would make you lose everything. This was the price you had to pay for provoking him. She suddenly looked forward to the next battle. But it was a pity that no matter how she acted cute, the big ice block's mouth was like clam. He didn't tell her. She thought angrily. Why didn't he act like this when they were touching just now? Humph. Chapter 949. Not long after Jean Xian left Jiangning County with the army provisions, Pang Huang received news that several of his advisors had different opinions on the matter. Some felt that they should strike first to gain the upper hand and cut off Sichuan's army provisions. Others thought that they should take the initiative to attack and intercept Xiao Su's tens of thousands of troops. They would stop him from joining the army and attack from both sides at the same time. The 2 sides quarreled fiercely. Pang Huang rubbed his eyebrows. The quarrel was giving him a headache. He raised his hand to stop both sides, then turned to look at Ray Luo. Is there any news from Sichuan? He was hinting at the people hiding in the Southern Song Army. Ray Luo was about to talk about this matter, but when he heard the Crown Prince speak, he didn't dare delay. That person sent us a message saying that Xiao Su feels that his 30,000 troops aren't strong enough. He plans to head to Jiang Yifeng and join the 3 armies. Then, he'll defeat us one by one. Pang Huang narrowed his eyes. He wants to defeat us one by one? That's just wishful thinking. The advisors present agreed. Your Highness is right. Then what should we do? Pang Huang flung his sleeves and sat upright on the main seat. He spoke in an imposing manner. First, cut off his army provisions and throw them into disarray. Then, intercept them halfway and trap them. Stall Sichuan's army and cut off their escape route. Your Highness is wise. Everyone agreed. He didn't know why, but ever since he parted ways with Chu Qingyan in the valley, he no longer had any patience for Xiao Su. He couldn't wait to kill him. The sooner he ended the war, the sooner he could see her on the battlefield. Moreover, his imperial father had already ordered him to end the war quickly and annex southern Song and Sichuan's territories as soon as possible. Otherwise, it would be winter if he delayed any longer. When that time came, their people would starve and suffer from cold and hunger. Pang Huang's heroic phoenix eyes narrowed, and his killing intent was difficult to conceal. Jiangning County was very lively today. Because the army provisions had already left, the army had to follow closely behind. All the officers and soldiers were methodically packing up and preparing to set off. Under the locust tree, Cheng Yinluo stood in a white robe. She had applied a thin layer of makeup to cover her sickly cheeks, making her look even more radiant. However, her eyes, which were supposed to be sparkling, were as calm as still water. In just a few days, she had lost a lot of weight. Her slender waist was so slim that it was as if a gust of wind could take her away. Chu Qingyin stood in the courtyard and glanced at her. Sighing faintly, she walked forward and draped the cloak in her hand over her shoulders. "It's windy. This will make you warmer." When she felt the weight on her shoulders, she came back to her senses and heard the little girl's voice. She smiled faintly and said, "You're like an old woman, chattering nonstop. Isn't it because I care about you? You're really taking my kindness for granted." Chu Qingyin snorted and said, "It's almost time. Let's go pack up and get ready to go." Cheng Yinluo nodded. The two of them turned around and walked a few steps before they saw Ethereal walking towards them. Chu Qingyin instinctively glanced at the person beside her. This should be the first time the two of them met after falling out. Would they fight? She was already prepared to help her friend. Ethereal had also just seen the two of them. His eyes fell on the person a few steps away. Seeing that she had lost a lot of weight, his heart ached slightly. He walked forward and bowed to his little princess consort. "Little princess consort, are you going back to your room?" Chu Qingyin nodded. The atmosphere was a little awkward, and she didn't know what to say. At this moment, the person beside her didn't look at Ethereal. She didn't stop walking and walked past him as if they didn't know each other. Ethereal's body stiffened. When he was left alone in the courtyard, he slowly relaxed and smiled bitterly at himself. "Morongju, isn't this what you wanted? What's there to be upset about? You reap what you sow, but you can't regret it." He stood in the courtyard for a while before moving his numb feet and walking forward weakly. Chu Qingyin looked at the silent person beside her and felt a little upset. She wanted to persuade him, but she didn't know where to start. If she didn't persuade him, she would be worried. Just as she was in a dilemma, the person beside her spoke. "Little girl, don't worry. I'll get over it. It's just a relationship. It took me more than 10 years to go from liking him to falling in love with him. Give me the same amount of time, and I'll definitely forget about him until there's nothing left. If you don't want me, then I'll stop." Chu Qingyin met her calm but slightly red eyes. Her lips moved as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, she could only nod. "Actually, even you aren't sure if you can forget him. Meeting the right person at the right time is honey. Meeting the right person at the wrong time is arsenic." She hoped that given some time, the two of them would be able to mend their relationship. Before the army left Jiangning County, Xiao Su received news that the provisions had been completely destroyed by Pang Huang's ambush. "Master, Nansong fell into a trap," Hualing said happily. Xiao Su nodded without much expression on his face. His eyes under the mask narrowed sharply. "Turin, how's the arrangement of manpower? The people we sent have already imitated Wu Qing's handwriting and habits to perfection. A few days ago, under his master's orders, he arranged for a person who was good at imitating handwriting to be by Wu Qing's side. His goal was to replace Wu Qing in the end. We can take down Wu Qing now and replace him with our people," Xiao Su said without hesitation. "Yes." Turin bowed and accepted the order. "Then should we eliminate Wu Qing by the roots?" Fong Lu asked. Xiao Su shook his head. His eyes were deep as he said, "No need. Wu Qing is useful to us. Hualing, let Lu Guang be in charge of prying open Wu Qing's mouth. Find out who the mastermind behind him is and what their goal is." Hualing accepted the order. Then he asked in a puzzled tone, "Master, who do you think is the mastermind behind everything?" Currently, this prince has no clue. After we deal a heavy blow to Nansong, the mastermind might not be able to hold back and jump out. Xiao Su frowned. This feeling of not knowing whether the enemy was in the light or not was in the dark was very uncomfortable. Once this battle was over, he would definitely do a thorough investigation. If this person came from another country, then he wouldn't have to worry so much. However, if this person came from Sichuan, then it meant that there would definitely be a huge uproar in Sichuan in the future. He sorted out his emotions and focused all his attention on the great battle that was about to begin. It was futile to think about anything now. Only by advancing step by step could he ensure that the people around him were safe and sound. Master, the general guarding the city, has already led the troops to replace the city guards. The remaining people are already in formation and waiting to move out. After receiving the report from his subordinates, Hualing bowed respectfully and reported to his master in front of him. It's about time. Order the army to move out of the city. Xiao Su stood up and waved his arm. The people in front of him bowed respectfully in response. Then they turned around and moved out. The war between the two armies had only truly begun at this moment. Everyone rubbed their palms and raised their heads in anticipation. They had been waiting for this moment. Chapter 950. Your Highness Crown Prince, we have successfully burned all of the Sichuan's rations. The deputy general who had been sent out returned and announced the good news with a face full of excitement. Cheers rang out in the southern blue main tent. Pang Huang raised his brows, feeling that things had gone too smoothly. Feng Chun, tell me, how did you fight this battle? Feng Chun, who was feeling smug, immediately put away his smile and stepped forward. Reporting to your Highness Crown Prince, it's like this. We ambushed them at 7 Mile Cliff. In this place, one man can hold back 10,000 men. We occupied a very advantageous geographical position and set up an arrow formation. When the Sichuan's army entered our shooting range, we fired the fire arrows. At this point, Feng Chun couldn't help but raise his voice and say proudly, the rations were set on fire, and we caught them off guard. They had no time to think about fighting and immediately went to save the rations. However, our soldiers waiting at the foot of the mountain swarmed them and caught them off guard. They had to protect the rations and guard against us at the same time. They couldn't do two things at the same time. In the end, they couldn't care about either side, and the rations were burned by us. With that, the soldiers beside him all gave him a thumbs up. Pang Huang listened and felt that there were no flaws, but he felt that he was missing something. Qing Chang suddenly said, General Feng Chun, did you check if the rations were real? When he said this, Pang Huang's eyes lit up. This was exactly what he wanted to ask. Feng Chun's expression changed slightly when he heard this. He had been so focused on taking credit that he had completely forgotten about this. He wanted to confess, but this question came out of Qing Chang's mouth. He had always looked down on Qing Chang and felt that such a thin and weak body didn't deserve to stand with such strong and valiant people like them. Moreover, he always narrowed his eyes and spoke in an eccentric manner, as if he was constantly scheming against others. Being questioned like this, Feng Chun felt very uncomfortable. He said angrily, Of course I checked it. It's all proper rations. Mr. Qing Chang, do you have a problem with this general? Qing Chang replied calmly, This one doesn't. Good, Feng Chun, you've done very well this time. When we return, this prince will report your contributions to Royal Father. Pang Huang let go of a large stone in his heart and said with a bright smile. Feng Chun immediately agreed, beaming with joy. In fact, when he was at 7 Mile Cliff, he always felt a little strange. The provisions were burned too quickly, but when he heard His Highness the Crown Prince's promise, he immediately threw those doubts to the back of his mind. Maybe the wind was too strong. He comforted himself. Your Highness, now that Sichuan's provisions have been lost, should we take advantage of the victory to pursue and attack? Asked Reiluo. Pang Huang waved his hand. Don't be impulsive. Even if we run out of provisions, with Xiao Su's army of tigers and wolves, we won't be able to gain any benefits if we rush up and fight them head-on. Now that their rations have been burned, we just have to wait for their rations to run out. When they're starving and powerless, we will give them a heavy blow. When the time comes, even if Xiao Su has the title of God of War, he won't be able to resist us at all." Qing Cheng said from his side. Pang Huang was overjoyed, as if victory was in sight. He waved his hand and ordered, "In the next few days, don't act rashly. Conserve your energy and wait for orders before moving." This general obeys. In the main tent, the atmosphere was high and the blood was boiling. When Chu Qingyan learned that the provisions had been burned, it was already after the army had set off. She looked worried. "Are Jean Xin and the others okay? There aren't many casualties." He took the soldiers to do other things. Xiao Su comforted her. The original plan was to have Jean Xin pretend that the provisions had been burned, then take the opportunity to hide and wait for an opportunity to make a move. Although she was anxious after hearing his words, her anxiety receded a lot. However, she still couldn't help but ask, "Big ice block, what should we do without provisions?" "You don't have to worry about that. I have my ways," Xiao Su said indifferently. Chu Qingyan nodded. Just as she was thinking of a way to salvage the situation, she suddenly frowned and felt that something was wrong. "Why is it that you, the general, aren't worried, but I, an unimportant person, am so anxious for you? Are you hiding something from me? Tell me, what is your plan?" Xiao Su laughed and pinched her nose, his eyes teasing. "Do you really want to know? Isn't that obvious?" She slapped his hand away and said unhappily. Xiao Su retracted his hand. Her strength wasn't enough to swat a mosquito. He raised his eyebrows and leaned against the wall of the carriage. "I'll tell you when you've recovered." Chu Qingyan's mouth twitched. This was bullying a handicapped person. She turned her head and turned her back, ignoring him. However, a low chuckle came from behind her. She felt embarrassed and turned around to pounce at him. She wanted to tear off his mask and pinch his face to see if he could still laugh. However, she underestimated her body. Just as she was in the air, a pain in her chest caused her spine to spasm. Her entire body fell straight towards him. Xiao Su saw that something was wrong with her and immediately reached out to catch her. After she calmed down, he held his forehead and said helplessly, "Fortunately, I had the foresight. You should obediently recover. After you recover, whether you want to climb a tree to catch bird eggs or go into the sea to catch fish and shrimp, I won't stop you." This time, Chu Qingyan, who wanted to refute, didn't have anything to say. This was called she deserved to leave a weakness for him to use against her. After sitting down again, she thought it through. Other than the few years when Big Ice Cube grew up in the palace, he spent the rest of his time on the battlefield. He had fought more battles than she had, so she didn't need to be so worried. On the contrary, she didn't want to cause trouble for him. Because of her injury, the people of Jiangning County had specially prepared a carriage for her. She pulled Big Ice Cube along with her, while Yen Luo rode alone because she didn't want to be disturbed. She hugged her knees and sat on the couch, carefully flipping through the folk joke collection that Big Ice Cube had given her. She occasionally raised her head to look at him, admiring the handsome man before continuing to read. However, she didn't know why, but after the journey today, she felt that Big Ice Cube was absent-minded and lost in thought from time to time. She was a little puzzled, but before she could ask, Torin appeared beside the carriage. "Master, Ci Shui Slope is not far ahead. Do you need this subordinate to stop?" Ci Shui Slope? What was that place? Why did they have to stop? Just as she looked at the person beside her in confusion and wanted to ask for an answer, she saw a flash of sorrow in Big Ice Cube's eyes. She couldn't help but be stunned. She rubbed her eyes, wondering if her eyes were playing tricks on her. At this moment, Big Ice Cube had already answered. "Have the army stop and rest. We'll set off in 2 hours." Chapter 951. As soon as Xiao Su finished speaking, the carriage stopped, and the orderly and solemn sound also stopped. Chu Qingyan still didn't understand, but he already got off the carriage. She didn't have time to think and immediately followed him down the carriage. After she steadied herself, she saw Turin walking up with a bag in his hand. "Master, everything is ready." At this time, Hualing suddenly walked in front of his master, with a trace of grief on his face. "Master, This subordinate asks you to tell Feng Ling that I will visit him next year. Xiao Su nodded, then turned to face Chu Qingyin, who was walking over, and said, I'm going out for a while. You stay in the carriage. If there's anything, find Huo Ling or Feng Lu. After saying that, Xiao Su turned around and was about to leave, but his sleeve was grabbed. He turned around and saw a pair of watery eyes. What's the matter? I also want to go with you, Chu Qingyin said bluntly. Xiao Su furrowed his brows slightly as he pondered whether her body could withstand it. At this time, Chu Qingyin quickly explained, walking is no problem for me. If it's climbing, cough cough, it should also be no problem. Turin couldn't help but smile when he saw this, and said to his master, Gongzi seems to be much better. Why don't we let her follow? Xiao Su looked at the little fellow who showed a pleading look because of Turin's words, and his heart softened. Follow closely later. If you feel uncomfortable, I'll send you back. Chu Qingyin quickly nodded. If she didn't respond now, she would be a fool. So Chu Qingyin followed Big Ice Cube and the dozens of Xiao Lai cavalry behind him, and set off towards Ci Shui Slope. Ci Shui Slope, as the name implied, was a small slope, but this small slope was overgrown with weeds, as if it was forgotten by people. If it wasn't for the people in front clearing the way, they would have been drowned in these cattail weeds. The journey was very difficult because it had just rained heavily, the ground was very muddy, deep and shallow, and it took a lot of effort to walk. At this time, Chu Qingyin had several questions in her heart about the destination, but she found that everyone was focused on walking, and a trace of sadness appeared on their faces, so Chu Qingyin couldn't ask. Their emotions were infected by everyone, as if the road in front of them was dark and full of thorns. Everyone walked with incomparable difficulty. When they passed through the tall weeds, their vision finally opened up. Chu Qingyin let out a sigh of relief, and then after walking out of Big Ice Cube, the scene in front of her, all her movements froze. Tombstones of different sizes stood erect in the misty fog. There was no end in sight to the tombstones. While she was still in shock, Xiao Su had already walked up to her slowly. She looked at his back and felt an indescribable sadness. Even the air was filled with sadness. Her heart couldn't help but to think, what was this place? What's the persons to Big Ice Cube? At this time, the group of people stopped at the tomb at the front. Turin took out the things in the bag, candles and paper money. Were they going to sweep the tomb? The following Xiao Lai cavalry automatically put away their weapons and buried their heads in weeding. The candles were lit, and in the dense mountain fog, it flickered with light, as if it was illuminating the lost stars. Xiao Su lit the incense, and closed his eyes to mourn at the tomb at the front. Chu Qingyin's heart was full of doubts, and walked to the side of Turin, who was scattering paper money, and asked in a low voice, Turin, who's buried here? Turin looked at the rows of scattered tombstones in front of him, as if he was immersed in some kind of memory. There are a total of 483 tombs here, and the ones sleeping here are the most heroic Xiao Lai cavalry from 7 years ago. Their cavalry master is called Feng Ling, a member of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, air, wind. 7 years ago, Sichuan was also invaded by foreign enemies, and they broke through the border defense line with lightning speed. At that time, Master and we were very far away from here, and only Feng Ling, who was chasing the bandits, was nearby. So Feng Ling was ordered to secretly delay the enemy and wait for reinforcements. But no one knew that the enemy couldn't stand being disturbed and thought of a way to surround the people nearby, forcing Feng Ling and the others to show up. Otherwise, they would burn the people alive. And the result? Hearing this, Chu Qingyin roughly knew the story. Although she knew the result, she still couldn't help but feel worried. Turin smiled bitterly. From the moment we entered the Xiao Lai cavalry, we always told ourselves that we are loyal to Master, and our responsibility is to protect the people. So the people were saved, and Feng Ling and the others didn't walk out of here. Before the war, this place was not called Ci Shui Slope, and it was later renamed by the people. Ci Shui Slope? Is there any special meaning? Chu Qingyin asked sadly. Turin's eyes turned sad, because that year, The blood of Feng Ling and the others dyed this place red, like a sea of blood. Little princess, did you notice that these tombstones didn't have names, because when we found them, we couldn't distinguish their original appearance? Ci Shui Slope, as the name suggests, the benevolent heroes used their own flesh and blood to exchange for the lives of the people. Chu Qingyan's eyes were hot, and tears almost fell. It was enough to see how fierce that war was. They are the heroes of the people, Chu Qingyan said softly. Turin slightly raised the corner of his mouth, with a sad arc. Yes, they are all heroes. In that war, no one retreated, and they all fought to the last moment. When they arrived, the ground was full of their former companions, and they didn't have any breath, and they wouldn't talk to them anymore, and they wouldn't accompany them anymore. They were brave and fearless, and with loyalty to their masters and protection of the people. They died on the battlefield in the most tragic way. Maybe it was because of this place, Turin, who was usually quiet, suddenly became talkative. Little princess, you should know that the person in charge of our intelligence group is Water Spirit, right? Chu Qingyan nodded. I only heard about her, but I didn't see her. Water Spirit and Feng Ling were a couple. That year, the master was supposed to hold a banquet for them, but who would have thought? The Earth Spirit heaved a heavy sigh. The saddest thing for two people who loved each other was to love you, but you left in the most unexpected way. Chu Qingyan finally understood why Big Ice was so sad and guilty when he saw these tombstones. Little princess, there's one thing that you may not know. It is about ethereal. Turin said faintly. What is it? Chu Qingyan still hadn't recovered from her sadness. Before Feng Ling's accident, the situation was relatively peaceful. Ethereal originally planned to return to the sect and reconcile with Miss Chung, but after this incident, he never mentioned Miss Chung again. Chu Qingyan was stunned. Turin sighed. Perhaps Ethereal was also afraid that if he left suddenly like Feng Ling, Miss Chung would be alone in the world like Water Spirit. Chapter 952. Chu Qingyan asked in surprise, do you mean that Ethereal rejected Yanluo again because he had no choice in reality? The Earth Spirit shook its head. This subordinate didn't say that. It's just that this subordinate feels that what happened between Kong Ling and Miss Chung back then can't be completely blamed on Kong Ling. It's because we chose a different path from others, so the heavy responsibility on our shoulders is something that others can't understand. Chu Qingyan was still immersed in Turin's words when Turin suddenly called out, Little princess consort. What's the matter? She looked at him. At this moment, Turin's eyes were filled with deep pleading. Chu Qingyan didn't understand what was going on. Actually, I'm telling you all this today because I hope that you can care more about Master. Every year at this time, Master's heart is filled with grief. No one can compare to Master in grief over what happened back then. However, he never tells anyone about it and silently bears it all by himself. Now, I'm very glad that Master has you by his side. The Earth Spirit's words made her very surprised and sad at the same time. In fact, under Big Ice Cube's strong outer shell, he bore many things that ordinary people couldn't bear, but he wasn't good at telling others. She turned to look at the person walking between the hills. Her eyes were filled with warmth, and she couldn't help but walk towards him. At this moment, the sudden drizzle made her feel that her vision was about to be covered by a gauzy mist. Between heaven and earth, the black figure became clearer in the vast expanse of whiteness. She walked to stand behind him. Perhaps he was immersed in his memories and didn't notice her approach at all. He placed one hand on the tombstone and gently stroked it with a mournful expression. Big Ice Cube, are you willing to tell me their story? Chu Qingyan walked in front of him and looked into his eyes with a slight smile. When he came back to his senses and saw the red marks in her eyes, Xiao Su guessed that she already knew who was buried here. He smiled faintly and asked, What do you want to hear? You trained hard together and had a glorious past, she said without hesitation. Xiao Su thought for a moment, and under her bright eyes, he finally agreed. Thus, she reached out and slid her fingers through his palm, holding his hand firmly. Then, she looked up and said, I'll walk with you while we listen. The heat from his palm brought a trace of warmth in this rainy weather. His eyes moved slightly as he nodded. Thus, the two of them strolled through the grass, passing through the tombstones of the nameless clan. Along the way, Xiao Su used his deep voice to recount the days of the past, with Chu Qingyan interjecting from time to time. The rain was not heavy, but in the mountain forest, the sky and earth seemed to be misty. The low narration came from afar and could not be heard clearly. Beside Turin stood the Shaolai cavalry that came with him. One of them said, "This is the first time Master has talked about the past since Lord Wind's spirit passed away." That's right. After Lord Wind's spirit passed away, those things in the past became taboo. No one dared to talk about it in front of Master, afraid that Master would feel uncomfortable. Another person said, "Little Princess Consort is Master's lucky star." Turin concluded. Everyone did not comment. From one end to the other, Xiao Su recalled bits and pieces of the past. As he spoke, when he finished the last sentence, he suddenly felt his eyes brighten. Chu Qingyan did not notice the change in him, as she was still immersed in the story he was telling. It had to be said that these people were all strong men, fearless. To be able to nurture such people, Big Ice Cube was truly very powerful. Some of them were orphans left behind in the war. Some were orphans who had lost their homes due to disasters. No matter where they came from, they all had one thing in common. They had no parents and struggled bitterly in the mortal world. If no one helped them, they would be swallowed by death. Big Ice Cube's appearance gave them life, gave them hope, and became their faith, so they followed him wholeheartedly and never betrayed him. This was also why, whenever there was danger, the Shaolai cavalry would have the heart to die and would rather sacrifice themselves than let their master suffer any harm. Everyone said that Xiao Su was fortunate to have such an invincible army. But others did not know, how much did he sacrifice for them? Every time someone left, the one who felt the most pain was only him. For so many years, he had been torturing himself because he was the one who gave the order. He felt that he had ruined the lives of more than 400 of his companions. But if he did not give the order, more people would die. Therefore, he gave himself a punishment that lasted for life. Because she saw through the prison in his heart, Chu Qingyan felt extremely sad, but she knew that it was useless. She had to help Big Ice Cube walk out. She tightened her grip on his fingers, causing him to look at her. "Big Ice Cube, the dead are gone. We should look forward and not be immersed in the pain of the past. This is also what those who left did not want to see." Her gaze landed on the tombstones in the boundless rain and said softly, "Back then, these martyrs saved countless people, fulfilling the righteousness in their hearts, sacrificing themselves. I think at the last moment, they were proud of themselves and had no regrets. They definitely did not want the living to be in pain. And what we can do is to work hard to live and then continue to fulfill their wishes so that they can rest in peace in the underworld." Big Ice Cube, sweeping the tombs, is not just a simple sacrifice. The important thing is to reminisce about the precious past, and then with a positive and optimistic attitude, work hard to live on. Willow leaf eyebrows, eyes sparkling, clear as a stream, sincere and beautiful. In the narration just now, the knot in his heart had slowly been untied, and the burden that had been suppressed for many years was finally put down. At this moment, when he heard the little fellow's words, it was as if a spring rain had hit, filling up the holes in his heart, warm and full. A soft light appeared in his eyes. "Ian, thank you. Thank you for listening to my story for so many years, and for being willing to accompany me all the way." Hearing this, she breathed a sigh of relief. The Big Ice Cube was finally put down, but she could not help but argue, "Why are you so polite? I'm not an outsider." Xiao Su could not help but laugh. He raised his hand and rubbed her head. Okay, I was wrong." Only then was she satisfied, and just as she was about to continue speaking, she suddenly heard a few sneers, followed by a pleasant voice with a strange tone. Yo, you actually know how to apologize? You know how to open your heart to people? You know how to coax girls? Did the sun rise from the west?" As soon as these words fell, Chu Qingyan immediately became alert. It was simply too shocking to be able to sneak in under their noses. She could not help but coldly shout, "Who's there?" Chapter 953. Who's there? Of course I'm there. The amused voice rang out again, but Chu Qingyin looked around and saw no one. She couldn't help but mutter, where exactly was this person? But from his words, he didn't seem to have any hostility. She heard the person speak again. This rain is really annoying. I can't even see clearly. I've squatted here for so long to look at my disciple's wife. What the hell? Disciple's wife? At this moment, Xiao Su, who was standing quietly by the side and watching the two, suddenly spoke up, Master, don't scare Ian. The voice muttered, You're so protective of your wife. Did I miss something good when you weren't around for the past few years? The two of them were answering one-on-one, and Chu Qingyin finally reacted. Master? Big Ice Cube's master. At this moment, a figure appeared in front of the two with a swoosh, holding a paper umbrella in his hand. In the misty rain, the person who came was handsome and charming. Your Big Ice Cube's master, Half Moon Old Man? He was once a martial arts alliance leader, a strategist, an official of the imperial court, and now a martial arts legend who travels the world. It was Chu Qingyin's first time seeing this person, and couldn't help but blurt out. But after saying that, she looked at the incomparably beautiful man in front of her and couldn't help but have doubts. You're so young, you don't look like someone in your 30s or 40s. After muttering to herself, she turned to ask, Big Ice Cube, do you have another master? Xiao Su couldn't help but laugh at her confused look. The person holding the paper umbrella had a smug look on his face when he heard that, and winked at Xiao Su. Where did you find this clown wife? Big Ice Cube's disciple. He purposely dragged out the last few words. Xiao Su coughed softly and declared, Although you're my master, this is Ian's personal Chun Wei, so you should call me by my name. The man with the paper umbrella was unhappy. Forget your master when you see a beauty. Just when Chu Qingyin thought she had caused the conflict between the master and disciple, and was about to explain, the beautiful master had already changed into a playful and affectionate look, waving at Chu Qingyin as if he was talking to a child. Nice to meet you, disciple's wife. Come, I don't know what you like, so I pulled out a book from under the table for you to read when you're free. As she spoke, the beautiful master took out a tattered book from her sleeve and stuffed it into her hand. She thought for a moment, then took out a big bag of gold balls and stuffed it into her hand. She said nonchalantly, This is for you to play with. He had an old book in one hand and a heavy sack in the other. Chu Qingyin felt that her beautiful master's way of doing things was really hard to fathom. At this moment, Xiao Su saw the book in her hands, and a hint of surprise flashed through his eyes. He then understood and smiled at her. This is the only book on cultivating inner strength, and you can't find a second one in the world. It's a secret manual that martial artists fight over. This bag is filled with marbles made of gold, so you can keep it. Don't be polite. Good girl, quickly thank your master. Xiao Su rarely saw the little fellow reveal such an adorable expression, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. Both of these were good things, and Chu Qingyin was simply too pleasantly surprised. She hurriedly went along with the Big Ice Cube's words and said with a smile, Thank you, beautiful master. Because she was too happy, she called out the name in her heart, but it was too late to stop. However, the half-moon old man was very satisfied with this name and patted Xiao Su's shoulder. Although you've always been so unadorable, I've always felt that it was a pity. Who would have thought that you would finally find me, such a cute disciple's wife? Not bad, you're worth teaching. The corners of Xiao Su's mouth twitched, and Chu Qingyin touched her nose embarrassedly, but she was very surprised by the interaction between the two. This was the first time she saw someone talk to the Big Ice Cube so unscrupulously, and the atmosphere between the two seemed to be faintly harmonious and warm. Master, you and the Big Ice Cube have a very good relationship. Because it was the first time they met, Chu Qingyin didn't know what to talk about, but she still knew how to say some heartfelt and pleasant words. Not good at all. If it was good, he should have followed me around the world back then and traveled everywhere. He abandoned me. He's absolutely despicable. The beautiful master was very indignant as she complained. Chu Qingyin blinked and then looked at the Big Ice Cube. Being looked at by his little fellow with a questioning gaze, Xiao Su turned to his master and said indifferently, "If master's so-called traveling refers to visiting brothels, entering casinos, and robbing the rich, this disciple feels that doing something practical for the country and the people is more important." Chu Qingyan blinked and finally looked at the beautiful master. The beautiful master was looked at by his disciple's daughter-in-law with such a clear gaze, and his old face was a little embarrassed. He angrily said to Xiao Su, "You're exposing me again. I already told you, when you're outside, you have to leave some face for me. Don't forget, it was master who raised you up with nothing but shit and urine." Xiao Su indifferently retorted, "Master, before you say this, put away the beauty's paper umbrella in your hand." The beautiful master looked up at his umbrella. It was quite normal, but it was more suitable for a woman to hold, and he took it with him from the brothel today. However, he already didn't have the mood to continue bickering with his disciple, because every time he was shut down by him with a few words. Thus, the beautiful master turned to his disciple's daughter-in-law and said, "Su'er is so quiet and doesn't know how to be romantic. You definitely won't be happy with him. Why don't you come with me? I'll take you to see all the beautiful men in the world, and then I'll pick a beautiful husband for you. How about that?" Chu Qingyan hadn't had time to recover from the bickering between the two, and she was accidentally led into the beautiful master's trap. Just as she was thinking about how to refuse without hurting this old man who still had a childlike innocence, the big ice cube had already pulled her to his side. "Master, this is my person." The beautiful master snorted and said, "You're still so boring. Not fun at all." Xiao Su glanced at him and ignored his protest. Instead, he said indifferently, "Master, this umbrella doesn't suit your style and bearing." When a man who was nagging heard this, he glanced at his umbrella and felt that his disciple's words seemed to make sense. He immediately turned his hand and stuffed the umbrella into his disciple's daughter-in-law's hands. He didn't feel that there was anything wrong with giving away something that he didn't want anymore. "Disciple's daughter-in-law, help me hold it." After he finished speaking, raindrops fell on his face. The beautiful master muttered, "It doesn't suit, but it can shelter you from the rain." Finally, he felt that something was wrong. "Good, sir. You're scheming to make me give the umbrella to your wife. How cunning." Chu Qingyan immediately handed the umbrella over. "Master, you can shelter yourself. No need. I'm in good health, and you're still injured. You can cover yourself for fun," the beautiful master said proudly. Chu Qingyan looked at this pair of master and disciple and felt inexplicably funny. Chapter 9:54. When Chu Qingyan was smiling helplessly under the umbrella, she suddenly realized that her clothes seemed to have dried. She was slightly surprised and recalled that when the beautiful master passed her the umbrella, he seemed to have raised his hand and brushed it in front of her face. Could it be that the beautiful master helped her to dry her clothes at that time? This was the only explanation at this time. Yeah, she had to hug this thigh tightly. At this time, she heard the conversation between the two people in front of her. "Master, why are you here?" Logically speaking, the master was not a person who liked to go to the mountains and forests. He liked to be lively and go where there were many people. Seeing him here, Xiao Su was very surprised. The beautiful master waved his hand with a casual expression. "When I was in the land of warmth, I heard people say that you went to war, so I specially came to see if you lost an arm or a leg." "Master, you must be being hunted down," Xiao Su said lightly. "You don't say. Those people from the Tiger Head Gang can't take a joke at all. Now, they're everywhere looking for—" the beautiful master blurted out, but stopped at the end. He looked embarrassed and finally became angry. "Su'er, didn't I teach you not to expose other people's scars?" "You're right, master." Xiao Su's tone did not sound remorseful at all. The beautiful master stomped his feet and disdained to walk with him. He squeezed into his disciple's wife's umbrella and winked at his disciple. Xiao Su's mouth twitched. He really did not want to admit that this person was the master he had not seen for many years. The more he lived, the more backward he became. At this time, Turin walked forward and saw the half-moon old man. He was pleasantly surprised and respectfully bowed. "Master Half Moon, why are you here?" Your subordinates haven't seen you for a long time. The beautiful master glanced at him and smiled. Country bumpkin, I haven't seen you for a few years, and you've become more and more high-spirited. Are you interested in going to Jianghu with this old man? This old man remembers that you're good at making tea. Master Half Moon, I still have to go to war with my master. I can't accompany you. Moreover, I don't know how to make tea. The one who knows how to make tea is ethereal. Turin replied righteously. The beautiful master rubbed his nose and looked around. I knew it. How could someone as stubborn as he know how to make tea? So this old man remembered wrongly. The one who knows how to play chess is definitely you. The chess player is water spirit, Turin corrected. The carving must be a fire spirit. The beautiful master challenged her memory again. It's the wood spirit, Master Half Moon. Turin corrected again. Xiao Su couldn't stand it anymore. He said to Turin, inform everyone to prepare to return to the camp. Yes, master. At this moment, the beautiful master who had been muttering to herself suddenly said, Su-er, I'm not going to the barracks. Xiao Su looked at her and thought for a while. Turin, let the fire spirit take the others and leave first. Ben Wang and Ian will stay here for a while. Do we need to let the others stay? Turin was a little worried. As soon as he finished speaking, someone knocked on Turin's head. Bumpkin, with this old man as your master here, what do you have to worry about? Go, go, go. Don't be an eyesore here. Isn't that right, my daughter-in-law? Chu Qingyan was watching a good show from the side. She didn't want to be dragged into the situation. She hurriedly tried to get away with it. With the half-moon old man's guarantee, Turin didn't delay any longer. He immediately led the people down the mountain. Before leaving the hillside, the three of them burned a stick of incense in front of the tombstones. Xiao Su stood at a high place and looked at the hundreds of tombstones in a daze. The half-moon old man who was standing beside Chu Qingyan said faintly, Su-er, those few years weren't easy. Chu Qingyan nodded empathetically. He suddenly said to her, my daughter-in-law, when are you going to give birth to a grand disciple for master to play with? Chu Qingyan's earlier melancholy was instantly choked in her throat, and she blushed. Cough, cough, cough. Xiao Su collected his emotions and turned around. He saw the little fellow whose face was completely red. He looked at his master reproachfully and said, Master, don't bully her. After saying that, he pulled her away. The half-moon old man was so angry that he stomped his feet. Didn't he just want a grand disciple? Is it appropriate for you to bully master like this? She couldn't help but admit that this master was very cute. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but speak up for him. If I don't bully her, he's going to leave. Xiao Su's lips curled into a faint smile. Chu Qingyan could feel his true happiness. She thought unkindly that it was his fortune to be bullied by the big ice block. After all, he cared about this person. Otherwise, with the big ice block's temper, he wouldn't even be willing to look at unrelated people. Looking at a certain beautiful master who was abandoned by his disciple and his wife, he was very sad. His disciple ran away with his wife and didn't want him anymore. As the few of them left, the rain gradually lessened. Finally, the sky began to clear up. Sorrow had its end, but so did joy. The three of them went down the mountain from another direction and found a clean place to sit down and rest. After the rain, the air was fresh and clean. Everyone felt relaxed. Along the way, the beautiful master talked about his heroic deeds in the pugilistic world. Xiao Su listened quietly and didn't expose him. Chu Qingyan expressed a strong curiosity about the rich and colorful life of the pugilistic world. She would ask questions from time to time. Usually, he didn't have much interest in these things with his taciturn disciple. Now that there was a daughter-in-law who knew how to appreciate his disciple, the more the beautiful master looked at her, the more he liked her. The more he talked, the more excited he became. In the end, he kicked his taciturn disciple off to hunt and prepare dinner. In a short time together, Chu Qingyan finally understood the strange expression on the big ice block's face when he mentioned his master. This master was really a god who caught people off guard. His words and actions were not arrogant, and he looked like an idle young master. However, if one listened carefully, they would be able to feel that this person was very experienced and knowledgeable. No matter what the topic was, he could continue to talk about it. Moreover, he had his own unique views on political affairs. Chu Qingyin finally understood what it meant to be a real person. However, this beautiful master seemed to be very picky. One moment, she said that the haystack here was uncomfortable for him, and the next moment, she said that the fire was not burning hot enough for him to feel cold. As soon as he sat down, she changed from her previous cheerful appearance and became very picky. If it were someone else, they would have already flipped out. However, Chu Qingyin really liked this master and felt that it was a junior's duty to respect the elders. She was tormented by him without complaint. The beautiful master crossed his legs and looked at the little girl busying herself. There was a satisfied light in his eyes. This taciturn disciple didn't drop the ball. He found him a one-in-a-million daughter-in-law. He immediately waved to her. "Disciple's daughter-in-law, don't be busy. Come here." Chu Qingyin didn't know that her performance along the way had passed the master's assessment. She put down the firewood and walked over. "Master, is there anything else to do? You're injured. Don't run around. What if you hurt your body? Girls should cherish themselves." The beautiful master waved his hand. Chu Qingyin was speechless. Who was the person who ordered her to do things just now? Come, my disciple's daughter-in-law. Let master take your pulse." The beautiful master called out to her. "Okay." Chapter 955. Although she didn't know why her master suddenly wanted to take her pulse, she still obediently stretched out her hand. The beautiful master placed his fingers on her wrist and quietly felt it. Chu Qingyin was a bit bored, and her gaze couldn't help but be attracted by that pair of delicate hands. This heaven-defying appearance and enviable skin. How did he maintain it? Just as Chu Qingyin was studying it, he had already retracted his hand. "My internal injury is a bit serious. Adding on the fact that I didn't receive timely treatment, it has worsened." Chu Qingyin was stunned as she looked at her hand with some worry. At this time, a voice pierced through the air. "Master, don't scare Ian." Chu Qingyin turned her head and saw a person slowly walking over with a few rabbits. She immediately stood up and went forward to help him. The beautiful master rubbed his chin and smiled. "Sewer isn't fun at all, disciple's wife. Although your injury is a bit serious, luckily the person who treated you has some skills and treated you very well. Next, you just need to properly cultivate the Heart Sutra that I gave you. When the time comes, you will definitely be able to cultivate your body and your skills will also improve. Work hard. When the time comes, I will bring you to the pugilistic world to play. Maybe when the time comes, you will take a fancy to some sex disciple and not want Sewer anymore." Xiao Su was helpless towards his master's blatant instigation, but he still had the heart to expose his master's words. "Master, you've said so much in a roundabout way. It's just that you want Ian to cultivate that Heart Sutra. There's no harm in you saying it directly." Chu Qingyin blinked her eyes. Was he referring to the Heart Sutra that her master gave her today? The beautiful master's old face couldn't hold it in anymore as he angrily glared. "Stinky brat, your wife's meridians are not bad and suitable for martial arts. If she can receive some guidance, although she can't reach your level, she will still be one of the best in the pugilistic world. You're actually so bad. Can't you let your master be a bit more tactful?" Chu Qingyin was amused as she listened on the side. The beautiful master turned his head again, and the expression on his face changed 180 degrees. He smiled and lovingly said, "Disciple's wife, you have a lot of potential. You have to study diligently. Your master is hungry. Quickly roast the rabbits. Your master is about to drool." Chu Qingyin felt that the beautiful master's emphasis was on the last sentence. The three of them walked for half a day, and she was also a bit hungry. She began to prepare the game without saying anything. The seasoning powder that he had asked the Earth Spirit for before he left had also come in handy. Not long after, the meat roasted on the grills roasted ons to emit a tempting fragrance. To the point, to the point, to the meat roasted by the meats, dripping oil zestes, mouth is zest to the point. To the end of the roast to eat. Chu Qingyin could not help but smile when she saw this. "Master, we can start eating soon." Teat to looks to the point. By the time they started eating, The beautiful master had already devoured everything. He didn't have time to talk, and was too hot to complain. He was eating with relish. Xiao Su broke off a leg from the meat and passed it to the person next to him. He also ate slowly. The beautiful master glanced at him. You have to eat like this to appreciate the deliciousness of the food. He took another big bite. In the firelight, Chu Qingyan saw a faint smile on the big ice cube's face. His gaze was fixed on the person eating heartily. She couldn't help but smile too. It wasn't easy to see the big ice cube reveal such a gentle expression. It would be even better if there was another pot of wine at this time. After the beautiful master was full, he leaned against a tree trunk and burped. He didn't pay attention to his manners at all, and just did whatever was comfortable. Master, I have a winery in Jiangnan. If you don't mind, you can visit there. I'll get someone to send you wine. Chu Qingyan smiled. The beautiful master's eyes lit up. Really? Chu Qingyan didn't say anything and took out a jade pendant from her sleeve and handed it to him. As long as you see this jade pendant, the winery under my name will provide you with an unlimited amount of wine. This is Ian's filial piety to you. The big ice cube said that the Heart Sutra was a treasure that all martial artists wanted. The master gave it to her because he acknowledged her identity and showed his love for her. How could she be stingy when the master gave her such a precious gift? The beautiful master held the jade pendant and was as happy as a child. Chu Qingyan turned and smiled at the big ice cube beside her. Master is really easy to satisfy. Xiao Su's mouth twitched. He didn't make any comments. Disciple's wife, I still have a few secret manuals that can be used as table legs. I'll get Suer to send someone to get them later. In the future, if you have anything good to eat or fun to play with, remember to show your filial piety to your master. Otherwise, your master will be wandering alone in the mortal world. My only disciple is so cold-blooded and heartless. Your master is so pitiful. The beautiful master sobbed. Chu Qingyan hurriedly agreed. Sigh, he really is an old man who loves to act. Xiao Su looked at him, pretending to wipe his eyes to gain the little fellow's sympathy. He expressed his disdain for such behavior. Gradually night fell. Chu Qingyan's body was a little weak. After chatting for a while, she unknowingly fell asleep. Xiao Su took off his coat and draped it over her body. At this moment, the sloppy half-moon old man saw this scene and couldn't help but tease, "You're becoming more and more like a husband." His disciple remained silent. Half-moon old man felt a little bored. He chewed on a piece of grass and looked at the crescent moon above his head. He swung his legs and smiled faintly. Suer, how many years have we been apart? Exactly 5 years. Xiao Su said without hesitation. You must have lived well in these 5 years. At least you have more expressions on your face. You're no longer as expressionless as before. Half-moon old man glanced at him and smiled. Xiao Su didn't refute. I have Ian by my side. Master knows that it was the retired emperor who arranged this marriage for you. Previously, I met your grandfather in the tavern. He didn't bring any money and cheated me of a lot of money for wine. Just thinking about it makes me angry. Oh no, I digress. Your grandfather said that you have a calamity in your life and you need a fated person to solve it. As long as this fated person stays by your side, you can turn misfortune into blessings. After thinking about it, he found this person. How could he tie her to your side? He slapped his head. Why don't you get engaged? Anyway, you lack a wife. She hasn't grown up yet. You can raise her and play with her. At the same time, you can also temper your temper. Half-moon old man laughed treacherously. Xiao Su didn't know that there was such a reason. He only wanted to rub his eyes when he heard this. An unreliable master and an unreliable imperial grandfather. This was really enough. But to be honest, the little girl is quite unlucky. She got involved with this foul imperial family. So, you have to treat her better. Half-moon old man finally said something reliable. Xiao Su nodded seriously. Disciple will remember. Sigh, it's not easy to make an iceberg understand. Master thought that you would be a bachelor for the rest of your life. Chapter 956. Chatting with his master, accompanied by his true love, was a rare moment of relaxation. In Xiao Su's eyes, This was more like a family having a picnic outside. Master, where do you plan to go next? Xiao Su leaned on the tree trunk and turned to ask. I'll decide tomorrow. If you don't have to worry about tomorrow's matters today, then you can enjoy your life. The half-moon old man said leisurely, then started to hum a tune. Leisurely, leisurely, there's meat, there's money, my heart is leisurely, my troubles are leisurely. Throughout the mountains, other than the chirping of insects and the croaking of frogs, there was only a clear and interesting hum. How long had it been since he heard this tune? Xiao Su looked up at the night sky, the stars twinkling in the sky. It was as if he had returned to those peaceful years. The mortal world is leisurely. Life and death are leisurely. There's trouble and there's suffering. I have it, you have it, everyone has it. It's better to have a leisurely day, a leisurely lifetime. When Chu Qingyan woke up, the sky was already bright. She felt that she hadn't slept so comfortably for a long time, and it was under such natural scenery that she could completely relax. Last night's dream was filled with pleasant tunes. She couldn't help but stretch lazily, stood up refreshed, folded the big ice cube's coat, and then looked around to see where they had gone. At this time, a fruit flew over. She raised her hand to catch it, and then looked in the direction it came from. She smiled and said, "Good morning, Master. Disciple's wife, did you sleep well last night?" The beautiful master popped his head out from the tree and greeted her. She nodded. At this time, Xiao Su walked over with a few fish, not a trace of water vapor on his body. "Good, we'll have grilled fish this morning." The beautiful master immediately urged his disciple's wife to prepare. Chu Qingyan smiled and agreed. It's good to have a wife who can cook. If you weren't taken, Master would have brought you along. The beautiful master bit into the fish, his tone full of pity. But as soon as he finished speaking, he received a cold glance from his disciple and immediately looked away as if nothing had happened. Seeing his disciple's angry look, it was really good to eat. "Master, how can I be like you with the art of retaining one's youthful appearance? Can you teach me?" Chu Qingyan was very curious, and since she had the time, she immediately asked, "Do you want to know?" "Yes, yes. Which girl wouldn't want to?" The beautiful master beckoned with her finger. When Chu Qingyan saw this, she immediately wanted to go up to him. However, her collar was grabbed. She turned around and saw a dark face. "Sit properly," Xiao Su said grumpily. Chu Qingyan heard this and immediately became angry. "What are you doing?" The beautiful master at the side immediately fanned the flames. "Disciple, how can you be so fierce to your disciple's daughter-in-law? Be careful not to scare your wife away." "I'm not his wife." Chu Qingyan hugged her shoulders and snorted. Xiao Su felt a headache coming on when he saw the two of them standing together against him. "That's not what I meant, Ian." "What do you mean?" Chu Qingyan narrowed her eyes. "You don't want me to ask Master for advice. Is it because you don't want me to maintain my appearance? Do you want me to obediently stay at home and be your haggard wife in the future?" That's what he meant. The beautiful master didn't realize that she was the fuse at all and continued to fan the flames. Xiao Su rubbed his eyebrows and then took the little fellow's hand. He lowered his eyes and explained, "What I mean is, no matter what you look like, you'll always be the most beautiful in my eyes. There's no need to think about those insignificant methods." Once these words came out, they successfully appeased Chu Qingyan's emotions. Her family's big ice cube was the kind of person who didn't usually say romantic words, but when it came to critical moments, he would immediately seduce people. What should she do? She really wanted to pounce on him. But, cough cough, public morals are degenerating day by day. How can you casually say such words in front of the elderly? Also, disciple, you were jealous just now, weren't you? An untimely voice sounded. Only then did Chu Qingyan remember that there was someone else beside them. She immediately stood up and stomped her feet. "I'll go get some water for you to drink." After saying that, she immediately ran off. The beautiful master, who wished for the world to be in chaos, took the last bite of the fish and pulled the fish bone out of his mouth. He said with a smile, "Disciple's daughter-in-law is so easily embarrassed." Xiao Su sighed lightly. In the future, he shouldn't let the little fellow stay with Master. Otherwise, he would have to think about how to put out the fire every day. Time passed by amidst the jesting of the beautiful master. Good times always flew by quickly. Disciple's daughter-in-law. Master has to go. So fast. In a short period of time, she already liked this beautiful master who didn't put on airs and was very cute. There's no banquet that doesn't end. But before I leave, Master has a gift for you. The beautiful master said with a smile. But when we met, didn't Master just give Ian a gift? Chu Qingyin hurriedly said, This is what it means to have a beginning and an end. Come, watch carefully. Master will show you a set of sword techniques. You can remember as much as you can. There's no need to force yourself. As soon as his voice fell, the beautiful master picked up a withered branch from the ground and began to wave it. Graceful and graceful like moving clouds and flowing water like a dragon swimming in the air. Every move was like a silver chain, wantonly dancing in the air, beautiful and smooth. Knowing that this was the beautiful master teaching her martial arts, she immediately watched without blinking, concentrating on memorizing the sword moves in her mind. When the last move was finished, the beautiful master looked at her with a smile. This is something that Master casually made up to deceive people when I was traveling these past few years. But it's very suitable for a girl like you. If you can remember 50% of it, you can walk sideways in Jianghu. Chu Qingyin's eyes lit up. Thank you, Master. Ian has memorized it all. Memorized it all? This time, it was the beautiful Master's turn to be surprised. She nodded heavily. Xiao Su said rather proudly, Ian has a photographic memory. The beautiful master glanced at his disciple's wife in surprise, then said regretfully, If only Master was born 20 years earlier. Su this brat is really lucky. Chu Qingyin laughed mischievously. All right, it's almost time. Master has a few friends to drink, so you don't have to send me off. The beautiful master waved his hand casually at the two of them with his back facing them. Then he swung the withered branch in his hand and walked slowly. However, every step he took covered several feet, and he soon disappeared in front of them. Only his loud chanting still echoed in the air. In life, you worry about me, and I suffer. Only talking about winning and losing, how much joy is there? It's better to walk the Jianghu with a jug of wine and a sword. Free and unrestrained, unrestrained and unrestrained. It was really enviable. Big ice block, Master is living so freely. Master is a person with a story. Only by completely letting go can he be carefree and open up about life. Xiao Su smiled faintly, then bent down in front of her. I'll carry you. She nodded, knowing that her current body was not suitable for practicing martial arts. Lying on Xiao Su's back, she looked back in the direction where he had disappeared. A faint admiration appeared in her eyes. Then she turned back and let the big ice block carry her quickly through the forest. Chapter 9:57. Big Ice Cube. Once we're done with everything, let's walk the Jianghu with wine and a sword. What do you think? She laid on his broad shoulders, feeling the wind blowing against her face. She suddenly had this thought and blurted it out. Xiao Su clenched his fists, his gaze deep. Although there was still a long way to go, and it would be very difficult, he still wanted to give her this promise. All right, if you want to go to the end of the world, I'll go with you. If you want to go to the end of the world, I'll go with you. The world is vast. Wherever you are, that's where I'll settle down. She hugged his neck tightly and smiled contentedly. No one knows what the road ahead will be like, but with your promise now, I'm satisfied. Happiness is not the end. It's the scenery that we'll see together through the ups and downs of the road. When the two returned to the army, it was already evening. After eating some dry rations, Huling passed on a message. Master, Jean Xian sent a message saying that he hasn't found the place where Southern Song's rations are stored. Xiao Su nodded. The Prince of Nansong is very cautious. Tell him not to be too anxious and to be careful. Huling nodded and continued. The Southern Song army is indeed as Master said. They're biding their time and have sent out scouts to monitor our movements. Turin said from the side, The carrier pigeons we sent out have been intercepted by the Southern Song army. It seems that Pang Huang already believes that our rations have been burned. He's waiting for us to be forced into a dead end before launching an attack. Xiao smiled slightly. Very good. Send people to pretend to be searching for rations and create an illusion for the Southern Song Army. Yes, master. The two obeyed. It was getting late. Everyone set up camp in the mountain forest. Some started fires, while others gathered firewood. Everything was done in an orderly manner. Cheng Yinluo's illness had not fully recovered, and she was coughing nonstop. At this time, other than the sound of patrolling and the chirping of insects, her voice was particularly clear in this quiet environment. Ethereal was grinding the medicinal powder when she heard the sound. Her brows furrowed tightly, and the pain in her eyes was so intense that it could not be dispersed. Chu Qingyan, who was looking into the distance, couldn't help but raise her eyebrows when she saw this scene. Could it be, as Torin said, that there was a secret to Ethereal? Big Ice Cube, do all you like to put your thoughts on other people? She couldn't help but poke the person beside her with her elbow. Xiao followed her line of sight and understood. He thought for a while and said, that depends on what it is. If it's for the other party's good, maybe. You guys are always so stubborn, unilaterally making decisions for others. I don't want to talk to you tonight. Chu Qingyan remembered how he sent her away that year and couldn't help but vent her anger. Xiao looked at the person walking away and couldn't help but sigh softly. His little fellow still couldn't forget this matter. What a headache. At this time, Chu Qingyan had already returned to her tent. Because she was dressed as a man, and because Yin Luo's identity had been exposed, she was now accompanying her as a female doctor. Therefore, Yin Luo had a separate tent. As for Cheng Yin Luo, because she was injured, she also had a separate room. At this time, Chu Qingyan sat in her tent for a while. She heard the sound of coughing from time to time. She couldn't stand it any longer and got up to walk to Yin Luo's tent. Why are you here? Cheng Yin Luo was surprised to see the person in front of her. Chu Qingyan sat down beside her and smiled. It's still early and I can't sleep. I heard you coughing, so I came to see you. Cheng Yin Luo was listless when she heard that. She smiled laboriously. I'll be fine in 2 more days. Chu Qingyan didn't really believe her. Although she didn't know much about medicine, she knew that emotions could affect a person's condition. Especially Yin Luo, who was depressed now. It was very detrimental to her condition. She wanted to mention her relationship with Ethereal, but after thinking about it, she felt that it wouldn't be good to be too direct. Therefore, she beat around the bush and said, You and Ethereal don't seem to have talked much recently. We're not in contact anymore. Cheng Yinluo's smile disappeared. Sure enough, the word ethereal was like gunpowder in front of her. Chu Qingyan was silent for a moment. If she didn't say anything now, she was afraid that she wouldn't have the chance to say anything in a few days when she would be busy. Yin Luo, have you ever thought that Ethereal seems to have suddenly become a different person? His attitude towards you is completely different from before. In fact, it might be because he has difficulties in his heart. Chu Qingyan didn't get any reaction from Cheng Yin Luo after she finished speaking. She felt that something was amiss. Cheng Yin Luo forced a nonchalant smile and said, Little girl, I've given up on him. Even if he has difficulties in his heart, it doesn't matter to me anymore. I can't accept a person who keeps pushing me away for reasons I don't know. Since he told me that there's no place for me in his heart, even if he has difficulties, I'll follow his wishes and believe him. Yin Luo, Chu Qingyan didn't know what to say. I'm exhausted. I've used up all my strength in the past few years. I can't go on anymore. Cheng Yin Luo smiled. Her eyes were like flowers of loneliness. No matter how beautiful the road was, no matter how much one looked forward to the end, if there was no one to support them along the way, they would give up sooner or later due to exhaustion. At this moment, Chu Qingyan didn't know what else to say to comfort her. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have brought this up again. Little girl, it's all right. You don't have to blame yourself. This is the life I'll have to face in the future. Cheng Yin Luo smiled faintly. A trace of envy appeared in her eyes. Actually, I'm very happy for you. You've met someone who cares about you. This way, you won't have to work so hard. Chu Qingyan held her cold hands, wanting to give her some warmth. Don't be sad. You still have me. All right. Cheng Yin Luo smiled at her. After Cheng Yin Luo fell asleep, Chu Qingyan left. On the way, she encountered Ethereal. "Young master," Ethereal called out, then stood there hesitantly. She could tell that he had something to say. She stopped in her tracks and asked, "What is it? Is she having a bad cough?" "I prepared some loquat cough ointment." Before Ethereal could finish, Chu Qingyan interrupted him. "Ethereal, tell me honestly, did you give up on Yinluo because you have difficulties?" Ethereal stood there silently. After a long while, he said sadly, "Young master, please believe me. I won't hurt Yinluo. Isn't the harm already there?" Chu Qingyan retorted. Ethereal was speechless. Chu Qingyan sighed softly. She took the ointment from him. "Why do you have to do this?" She then turned and walked towards Yinluo's tent. Ethereal lowered his eyes and smiled bitterly. As long as she lived well, he was willing to bear all the blame. Chapter 958. Sichuan's capital city. Higashio Motetsu stood in his study, holding the news about the front line in his hands. The little girl was surrounded and injured. These words tugged at his heartstrings. After seeing that she had successfully escaped danger, he let out a long sigh of relief. Then a question suddenly popped into his mind. He was thousands of miles away, but he couldn't bear to hear that she was injured. If he stood on the opposite side of her, how would he face it? If the little girl wasn't Xiao Su's woman, would it be easy for him to kill her? He clutched the letter in his hand tightly, a trace of confusion in his eyes. He had already decided on the outcome. Why was it that when he heard that she was injured, he began to waver? He had always done as he pleased. He rarely hesitated like this. Just then, someone knocked on the door. "Young palace master, the palace master is looking for you." Higashio Motetsu put away the expression on his face and returned to his usual frivolous self. "Tell him I'll be there soon." He threw the letter in his hand into the stove, opened his folding fan, and unhurriedly pushed open the door and left. When he reached the hall, the palace master was already sitting at the head of the table, waiting for him. When he saw him enter, his brows furrowed slightly. "It's not easy to find you every time. I have to beg and beg to see you. You're getting more and more arrogant." Higashio Motetsu had just sat down when he heard his father's words. His lips curled into a mocking smile. "Father, it seems that every time you look for your son, it's for other people's business." The palace master's face stiffened, and then he flew into a rage out of humiliation. "What kind of attitude is this?" "My attitude is right there. It's up to you whether you want to see me or not." Higashio Motetsu stood up and turned to leave. "Stop right there." The palace master slammed the table. Higashio Motetsu turned to look at him. "Father, please remember that your son is amenable to persuasion, but not coercion." The Eastern Court Palace Lord's face darkened when he heard this, but he tried to suppress his anger. In the end, he sighed and said, "Don't always act like a hedgehog whenever you see me. I won't hurt you." "Is that so?" Higashio Motetsu waved his folding fan, his smile full of ridicule. For the sake of the big picture, the palace master didn't want to bicker with him. Ignoring the sarcasm in his words, he asked, "How's the task I assigned to you?" Sure enough, every time he saw him, he had business, but he was used to it. Daunting Wang Yu sat back in her chair and replied casually, "I've already found out that one of the ministers is colluding with the left prime minister. I plan to give him the evidence of the right prime minister's corruption over the years." I knew he had ulterior motives. "Have you dealt with him yet?" The Eastern Court Palace Master was slightly angered. "Why are you so agitated over other people's affairs? I've already taken care of the person in secret. The evidence in his hands will be delivered to you by the afternoon at the latest. Don't worry, I didn't leave any traces." Higashio Motetsu sneered. The palace master was angry again because of his tone, but he knew that his son was frivolous and had a bad temper. He couldn't help but swallow his anger. There were still many things he needed him to do in the future. He snorted and didn't dwell on the matter. "By the way, there's something I need you to investigate." He remembered what his junior sister had told him and brought it up. "What is it?" Higashio Motetsu's handsome face showed some impatience. A young man appeared by Xiao Su's side. "His name is Chu Yen. Find out who he is," the palace master said. Higashio Motetsu tightened his grip on the fan when he heard this name. He lowered his eyes and asked in a normal tone, "Why do you want to investigate this person? This person has helped Xiao Su a lot. If we let him live, he'll be a disaster sooner or later. Now that he's not a threat yet, we need to get rid of him. But before that, we need to investigate his background." The palace master didn't notice the displeasure in his son's eyes when he said this. Higashio Motetsu waved his fan and said indifferently, "There's no need to investigate this person. I know him." "Oh, tell me." The palace master was surprised. Higashio Motetsu sneered. "He's just a third-rate kid. He's relying on his status as a distant relative of Xiao Su's fiancée, Chu Qingyan. He doesn't have any real skills, but he's good at gambling and eating." "Then what about the rumors in the past few years?" The palace master raised his eyebrows and looked at him. Higashio Motetsu leaned back in his chair and chuckled. He said in a mocking tone, "How can rumors be trusted? They're just rumors spread by Xiao Su's people to curry favor with him. If you don't believe me, you can send a few people to Lianxing to investigate." Hearing this, the palace master believed him a little. "Since you say so, then it's true. Recently, you should pay more attention to Ministers' movements. If there's any movement, send someone to inform father." Seeing that his father had given up on investigating the little girl's background, Higashio Motetsu also gave up on arguing with him. He agreed and turned to leave the room that made him uncomfortable. After leaving the room, Higashio Motetsu looked at the distant horizon with a worried expression. "Little girl, I can help you hide it now and ward off some disasters. But the longer you stay by Xiao Su's side, the more danger you'll face. When that time comes, what will you do? TSK, why are you so stupid? You like to squeeze wherever there's danger." At this moment, Chu Qingyan sneezed heavily. She rubbed her nose and heard Big Ice Cube's concerned voice. "Did you catch a cold last night?" Chu Qingyan put down her hand and shook her head. Pursing her lips, she said, "1 is thinking, 2 is scolding, and 3 is catching a cold. I hit 2 people just now. Someone must be talking behind my back." Xiao Su looked at her helplessly. At this moment, Hualing came in with a report. "Master, Jean Xian sent over some good news." When Chu Qingyan heard that it was about Jean Xian, she asked in surprise, "What good news?" "They've already found out where the Southern Blue Army hid their rations. It's in a long swamp valley, and there are countless soldiers guarding it. Normally, when they need rations, they'll send people to secretly collect them." Hualing reported with a smile. Chu Qingyan clapped her hands and smiled. "Beautifully done." Xiao Su also smiled because of this news. He really didn't misjudge Jean Xian. In terms of investigation ability, Jean Xian wasn't below Hualing and Turin. He instructed, "Send someone to send a message to Jean Xian. If he needs more manpower, send a message back." Hualing acknowledged and continued, "Just now, the various generals have also sent a message back. Their men are already in position and covered. If there's any movement, they can immediately mobilize their troops." "Very good. Now that we don't have any worries, we just have to wait for the enemy to walk right into our trap." Xiao Su revealed a steely expression. Everything was ready except for the east wind. Chapter 959. On this day, dark clouds drifted over from the horizon, casting a gloomy atmosphere. The air was humid, stuffy, and a little dry and hot, making it hard to breathe. Chu Qingyan looked up and had a premonition that something was about to happen. At this moment, Cheng Yinluo coughed softly and approached her. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm calculating when the enemy will attack." Chu Qingyan supported her with a smile. Cheng Yinluo smiled. "They'll come sooner or later. Don't think too much. By the way, why haven't I seen your pets for the past 2 days?" Chu Qingyan looked around. "They've gone to send off their companions. They should be back soon." Cheng Yinluo didn't quite understand. "What's going on? Don't we have a better chance of winning with the eagles and wolves?" She had seen them attack before. Because they were birds and beasts, the usual methods humans used to deal with them were useless against them. Coupled with their ferocious size, humans were no match for them. If the little girl and the others used them well, these eagles and wolves would become an invincible divine weapon. Chu Qingyin's lips curled up slightly as she explained. Big Ice Cube said that the eagle wolf listens to a person's orders, which is very rare in this area. So, in order not to attract too much attention and attract trouble, it's best not to let them appear in front of too many people. Furthermore, this is a war between humans after all. I don't really want to get them involved. Chu Qingyin said the last sentence very sincerely. She understood the little girl's thoughts. She couldn't help but reach out and pat the back of Chu Qingyin's hand. Those who are benevolent will be blessed by the heavens. Chu Qingyin smiled at her. At this moment, eagle cries and wolf howls came from afar. The two of them smiled and looked back. The few people standing under the shade of the tree heard the sound and looked over. They saw a few waist-high snow wolves pouncing on the red-clothed youth. A giant eagle stood by the side, humming disdainfully. In short, it was smiling happily. No one would have thought that the few animals that young master adopted back then would bring such a huge surprise. If I can participate in the battle between the two armies, how powerful would that be? Hualing clicked his tongue and sighed with emotion. Turing gave him a chestnut and said when he was feeling indignant, "Master has his reasons for doing this. If you have the leisure to chat here, why don't you go down and do more work?" Hualing snorted, "You talk too much." Xiao Su didn't pay attention to his subordinate's argument. His gaze was fixed on the person who was laughing heartily. His gaze was soft. He knew that the presence of the eagles and wolves would hasten the victory of the war, but he did not want to do so. Because of the appearance of the eagle and wolf packs during this time, Shui Ling had sent news that many people in the capital were eager to investigate the little fellow's identity. If he knew that she had such an ability, it would only bring him more harm than good. He absolutely couldn't allow the little fellow to be exposed to the wind and waves. He would rather spend more effort than let anything happen to her. His eyes were instantly replaced by coldness, and no one dared to look him in the eye. At this time, a scout quickly walked over. He stood in front of Xiao Su and respectfully reported, "Master, the Prince of Nansong has brought people to attack. They're already 10 li away." Xiao Su curled his lips when he heard this. They came just in time. 2 hours ago. Your Highness the Crown Prince, in the past few days, our subordinates have discovered that Xiao Su is secretly sending people around to exchange food with the common people. I heard that some of them have already begun to eat tree bark due to hunger. A general entered the main tent and reported. Pang Huang stood up when he heard this and revealed a happy expression. He walked in front of the Sichuan map and pointed at it. He said to the soldiers behind him, "Xiao Su's army has already arrived here. Have the ambush army prepare. Once they appear, immediately surround them." "Yes," the generals ordered. Pang Huang took a helmet from the side and proudly said, "This time, this crown prince will fight with you. Your Highness the Crown Prince is mighty." Everyone's morale was boosted, and their roars were deafening. "If we succeed this time, we will be able to reach the capital and force that old man Sichuan to roll off the dragon throne. The merger of the two countries will be just around the corner." Pang Huang raised his eyebrows and said domineeringly, "Make that old man Sichuan roll off the throne." Everyone shouted in agreement. Before the battle began, Pang Huang warmed everyone up with a few words. It had to be said that he was a very qualified commander. Thus, they waited 10 li away for the battle. And in a place that Pang Huang did not expect, a silent assassination was unfolding. In Changza Valley, a gentle breeze blew and the grass danced. More than a dozen black shadows shuttled through the tall grass. On the mountain road, a small group of soldiers carrying long spears were patrolling. It was already close to noon, and the sun was a little hot. The soldiers were a little impetuous and listless as they walked. The black figures lay in the grass and watched as the small group passed by the small path that they bought last year. The leader of the black figures raised his hand, and the others received the order to spread out and lock onto their targets. However, when the small squad arrived in front of them, the black-clothed man immediately leapt into the air and appeared behind the southern blue soldiers. Before they could even react and draw out their weapons, the black-clothed man had already soundlessly locked onto their lifelines. Their methods were very fast, and the soldiers fell before they could even feel the pain. "Sir, they've all been dealt with," one of them reported. The leader of the black figures took off his mask. It was Jean Xian, who had been ordered by Xiao Su. He ordered without hesitation. Change into their clothes and clean them up. Everyone complied, immediately stripping off the soldiers' clothes and changing into them. Then they disposed of their corpses. Very quickly, they picked up the spears on the ground and stood in a row. Under Jean Xian's hand gestures, everyone moved in the same direction as the Southern Blue soldiers, marching towards the long Swamp Valley campsite. After they left, the wind blew and the grass danced cheerfully. Everything was the same as before. No one would have thought that an assassination had just taken place here. No blood was spilled. Only the large patch of grass on the grassland had witnessed this silent ambush. Jean Xian and the others imitated the soldiers from before and slowly walked to the entrance of the camp. They thought that they would be able to enter smoothly, but they didn't expect to encounter an inspection. Jean Xian saw the strict formation outside the entrance and couldn't help but frown. This was different from what they had investigated for the past few days. "Sir, what should we do?" one of them asked in a low voice. At this moment, they were still walking towards the entrance, and there were still a few groups in front of them that were about to be inspected. "Wait and see," Jean Xian replied in a low voice. Soon it was their turn. The fat soldier leading the group, Bear, said fiercely, "Hey, which camp are you from? Give me the secret signal." Chapter 960. Jean Xian casually walked up. "What battalion are we from?" "We're under General Lang Lu's banner." "Do we still need a secret signal?" Lang Lu was one of Pang Huang's soldiers who was very good at fighting. He had made countless military achievements and had gained Pang Huang's appreciation. Now, he was in charge of looking after the provisions. However, there were some soldiers in the Southern Blue Army who came from other princes' factions. In order to show his generosity, Pang Huang sent some soldiers he didn't like to work with Lang Lu. In fact, he wanted to borrow Lang Lu's hand to make them a mere figurehead. Just now, there were two teams that didn't belong to Lang Lu's banner, so they were maliciously made difficult for by the fat soldier. On the contrary, Lang Lu's team went in without a hitch. Therefore, Jean Xian guessed that the fat soldier was sent by Lang Lu to make things difficult for those soldiers. Therefore, he pretended to be a rascal and probed. Sure enough, the fat soldier immediately waved his hand. All right, go in." Jean Xian nodded, but before he left, he curiously asked, "Yo, brother, why are you suddenly so strict?" Hearing this, the fat soldier spat and said very unconcernedly, "The orders from above said that His Highness the Crown Prince will personally lead the troops into battle. It can be seen how important this battle is. Therefore, we were ordered to look after the provisions and not let anyone take advantage of the loopholes." Jean Xian, who was taking advantage of the loopholes, said seriously, "Brother is right. I'll take the soldiers in to eat lunch. Later, I'll come out to continue patrolling. Don't let those thin Sichuan people take advantage of us." Good. Go, strive to make military achievements." At this time, a new soldier came in. The fat soldier said a few words and immediately went back to work. Then, Jean Xian lowered the brim of his hat and led the people into the pass. In a mountain forest, everyone was ready and waiting for the commander's orders. Xiao Su was wearing a silver battle robe and a red cloak fluttering in the wind. At this time, he stood in front of Chu Qingyin and whispered, "You and Sui stay here. After this battle is over, I'll come and pick you up." Chu Qingyin nodded. She really didn't want to stay here and wait for news, but she knew that her current physical condition wasn't suitable for the battlefield. If she went, she wouldn't be able to help and would only be a burden. So she made up her mind to recuperate as soon as possible. She watched the back of the big ice cube as it left. The cavalrymen and infantrymen quickly followed. The long road stretched as far as the eye could see. She clasped her hands in front of her chest and prayed for the big ice cube's safe return. Bai Yutong and the others looked at the crowd and howled into the sky. "Come back soon." Little C glanced at it in boredom and chirped a few times in a perfunctory manner. "Oh, don't be too late." After they left, Chu Qingyin patted their heads and was about to head back when she saw Cheng Yin Luo standing behind her. She was stunned for a moment before she scolded, "Didn't I tell you not to come out in the wind?" Cheng Yinluo retracted her gaze from the army and chuckled. "You have to let me out for some fresh air. Otherwise, grass will grow on my head." Chu Qingyin couldn't help but go forward to support her. "How are you today?" "I'm fine now. Don't treat me like a child anymore. I'm a doctor after all," Cheng Yinluo said with some disdain. Chu Qingyin rolled her eyes. "Don't you know what a doctor doesn't treat himself means?" Cheng Yinluo shrugged. The two didn't linger on this topic. "I heard that you met Big Ice Cube's master at CI, Shui Slope?" Cheng Yinluo asked curiously. Chu Qingyin heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that Cheng Yinluo wasn't as absent-minded as she was a few days ago. Now that she asked about it, she thought about it and told her about the playful and adorable side of her beautiful master, which made Cheng Yinluo laugh heartily. Cheng Yinluo wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes and patted her shoulder. "I didn't expect that such a cold person like Big Ice Cube would have such a funny master who doesn't play by the rules. It's hard to imagine such a combination." Chu Qingyin spread her hands. "I was surprised too. I was caught off guard by his appearance. But I like this master very much. He made me feel what it means to live a carefree life in the martial arts world." Cheng Yinluo nodded. "Actually, compared to Xiao Su's biological parents, his master is more like his father." Chu Qingyin's smile faded slightly. She sighed. "Yes, I'm very glad that he has such a doting master by his side who accompanied him through his dark childhood. Don't worry, he doesn't only have his master by his side now. He also has you, his mother-in-law, and all the companions who have gone through life and death with him. Of course, there will be some flaws in life, but the flaws won't obscure the jade." Cheng Yinluo had always known that the little girl was very concerned about this matter. She couldn't help but remind her when she happened to mention it. Chu Qingyin smiled brightly when she heard this. "I know. Thank you, Yinluo. Do you still need to be so polite to me?" Cheng Yinluo glared at her impatiently. Chu Qingyin chuckled. Then, she felt that something was wrong. She asked, "Why are you suddenly saying these things to me? It doesn't seem like you." She had been with Cheng Yinluo for a long time and had always been used to her sarcastic teasing. She rarely saw her speak in such a serious manner. She couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. Cheng Yinluo raised a hand to touch her forehead. "You found out so easily. All right, I do have something to tell you." Chu Qingyin looked at her with an "I knew it" expression. Cheng Yinluo smiled faintly and said, "Little girl, I'm going back to the medical center. I'm afraid I won't be able to help you with the business in Jiangnan in the future. But to be honest, I haven't done anything for you." Chu Qingyin was a little shocked when she heard this. "I know that you want to go back to the medical center. Why did you suddenly appear and not care about the business? Didn't you say that making money was your lifelong dream?" "That was a lie. Didn't I still have high hopes for Moronju at that time? I didn't want others to find out. It just so happened that you needed people to start your business, so I took the initiative to recommend myself. It seems that my deception was very successful." Cheng Yinluo laughed loudly. Chu Qingyin couldn't smile at all. "You did succeed. However, the best deception is to deceive yourself first before you can deceive others. So when you were hypnotizing yourself back then, you must have suffered a lot. If you miss me in the future, come to the medical center to look for me. My bastard father threw the medical center to me, so I have to take good care of it for him. Otherwise, he'll scold me again. TSK, I'm obviously not a kind person. How can I be so good at saving people's lives? I really admire myself." Cheng Yinluo rambled on. When she turned her head and saw the little girl about to cry, she was shocked and hurriedly said, "Don't cry. I haven't left yet, have I? At the very least, I have to see you finish this big reversal of the battle." Chu Qingyin couldn't help but throw herself at her. Her heart ached, but she couldn't say anything. Cheng Yinluo caught her in a flurry. Finally, the smile on her face gradually faded as she sobbed. Chapter 961. Xiao Su and the others had already arrived at Taishi Cliff with their army. The terrain here was uneven, making it very suitable for an ambush. Pang Huang appeared on top of the mountain with his men and looked down at Xiao Su and the others. His Royal Highness, long time no see. How have you been? Pang Huang took the initiative to greet him, as if he was receiving a guest from afar. As soon as Pang Huang's voice fell, the Southern Blue Army sprung up like bamboo shoots after a rain. They suddenly appeared around the Sichuan army. Huo Ling and the others immediately took out their weapons and carefully pointed their blades at the enemy. Xiao Su sat on his horse and looked through the layers of enemy troops. He looked at the black-armored Pang Huang and said with a cold expression, "Prince of Nansong, I didn't expect you to come. This is to show my respect to your highness. After all, you are the Sichuan war god that every country is afraid of. This prince was afraid that my subordinates would neglect you, so I personally came out to welcome you." Pang Huang smiled and said it in a dignified manner. It was as if he could turn black into white. Xiao Su also said indifferently, "I am indebted to your highness for thinking so highly of me. His Royal Highness, this prince has long admired you. I wonder if you can honor us with your presence in our tent?" Pang Huang asked in a very sincere tone. "Your Highness is too polite." Xiao Su's tone was indifferent. Is His Royal Highness looking down on us for being too small? Speaking of which, you only brought 20,000 men, and we have at least twice as many men. If we compare, it seems like our territory is a bit bigger." Pang Huang said with a fake smile. "Many thanks for your Highness' hospitality. However, since you've come all the way from the Southern Blue Continent, this prince must be the one hosting this banquet. Your Highness, why don't you dismount and have a chat?" Xiao Su replied. The two spoke across the air. Although their tones were very polite, it was not difficult to feel the swords in their words. It sounded like an invitation between friends, but in reality, Pang Huang was quietly asking for him to surrender. It was obvious that he had brought more people than Xiao Su. Moreover, Xiao Su's reputation was well known outside. The people he had brought along this time were all top experts in the Southern Blue Continent. They were enough to take on 10 people at once. Even if Xiao Su wanted to fight them head-on, it would be like throwing an egg at a rock. A fight between experts only lasted for a moment. However, to Pang Huang's surprise, Xiao Su was still able to talk to him in such an obvious situation. He didn't seem to be panicking at all. This made him a little apprehensive. But when he thought back to his deployment over the past few days, as well as the spies hidden in Sichuan's army, there was simply no flaw to speak of. He didn't know where Xiao Su's confidence came from. He couldn't help but think of the empty fort stratagem that was often used in military tactics. Could it be that Xiao Su was just putting on an act to make him think that he had an ambush? However, he didn't want to expose him at this time. He smiled with interest. "We don't need to be modest. This prince heard that your Highness martial arts have already reached the acme of perfection. No one in Sichuan can compare to you. This prince is also someone who loves martial arts. How about we exchange some pointers?" "Your Highness, this absolutely cannot be done." The Southern Blue generals who were looking at Sichuan's army with disdain immediately changed their expressions. This was because they remembered the bet between the prince and the youth surnamed Chu in the valley. They couldn't help shivering. Pang Huang raised his hand to stop his subordinates from speaking. He stared at Xiao Su with a serious expression. "How about it?" Xiao Su crossed his arms and raised his eyebrows. "Your Highness seems to be in a good mood." Pang Huang smiled. Then his eyes became sharp. "Actually, this prince admires one of your subordinates. Her name is Chu Yan. It's a pity that she is too loyal to you. This prince has repeatedly persuaded her, but she is unwilling to abandon the dark and seek the light. So, this prince thought that it would be better to ask your Highness for her. It's just that it's not good to be too direct. How about we exchange some pointers and she goes with whoever wins?" It was rumored that the Prince of Nansong always did things as he pleased. He would use any means necessary. Today, it could be said that he had experienced his style of doing things. However, Pang Huang couldn't ask anyone else, but he actually wanted to ask for Xiao Su's treasure. This made Xiao Su want to kill him. Xiao Su gestured to the people beside him. Then, he rode his horse forward a few steps. The Southern Song soldiers in front of him couldn't help retreating because of this cold, killing intent. Xiao Su's action was undoubtedly a response to the challenge. Pang Huang's face rippled with a smile as he took the broadsword from his subordinate's hand. Then, he leaped onto the soldier's shoulder and flipped in the air, sending the broadsword directly toward Xiao Su. At this time, Xiao Su flew up and unsheathed the flexible sword at his waist. In an instant, he released an imposing aura. After his broadsword missed, he immediately raised it vertically. Xiao Su was flying down, and the two people's weapons clashed in midair. A bright light suddenly flashed for where the two people clashed, dazzling the eyes of the onlookers. The two of them didn't wait for the crowd to react as they exchanged several moves. Black like a flood dragon, silver like a white light. The two figures were entangled in midair, unable to separate from each other. This was a rare confrontation between experts. The crowd couldn't take their eyes off of it. The two palms separated, and the fierce battle came to a temporary stop. Pang Huang had always been very confident in his own martial arts. However, after fighting with Xiao Su for a few rounds, he realized that his opponent's martial arts were above his own. When he was teaching, it seemed that he hadn't used his full strength. Thinking of this, Pang Huang felt that there was no need to continue. There was a faint uneasiness in his heart that kept reminding him. He temporarily suppressed the emotions in his heart and looked up at Xiao Su with a smile. His Royal Highness, if you continue fighting, the sky will be dark. This crown prince remembers a saying, the winner is king and the loser is a bandit. The situation is clear and you don't seem to have a choice. If you can dismount from your horse and surrender, then this crown prince will spare your army's lives. After these words were spoken, the soldiers behind Pang Huang waved their weapons and cheered. On the other hand, Xiao Su's people were very calm. Apart from being on guard against the southern Song soldiers, they didn't show any signs of fear. This made Pang Huang, who had the upper hand, feel a little less proud. Xiao Su's eyes were like torches as he looked at Pang Huang. His expression was as if he was in control of everything. Your Highness, are you sure that your side has more people and my side has less people? Is it not? Pang Huang frowned as the uneasiness in his heart increased. Xiao Su had one hand behind his back and the other holding his sword. Seeing Pang Huang's suspicious expression, he didn't explain and directly told him with his actions. He raised his hand, and the dozen soldiers behind him suddenly waved their flags. The Southern Song soldiers didn't know what was going on. Shouts came from all directions and echoed in the cliffs. The Southern Song army's expression changed. Pang Huang clenched the large blade in his hand and turned his head to look around. He saw that Sichuan's army had suddenly emerged from the terraced cliffs not far away. Originally, they had surrounded Sichuan's army. However, the situation had suddenly changed. They were now sandwiched between Xiao Su and Sichuan's army, unable to move. Chapter 962. Looking around, the entire mountain was filled with Sichuan soldiers. Moreover, there were so many of them that Pang Huang was stunned. What was going on here? While he was confused, a group of soldiers suddenly rushed over from the side. They were covered in blood and were in a sorry state. It was clear that they had just experienced a life and death battle. A soldier behind Pang Huang recognized these people and said in surprise, "Isn't this General Lang Lu's deployment? Why are they here?" Lang Lu, Pang Huang immediately angrily looked at them. "Shouldn't you be guarding the provisions in Long Marsh Valley right now?" These soldiers all knelt on the ground and cried out with a mournful expression, "Your Highness, we are indeed General Lang Lu's subordinates. For hours ago, someone pretended to be one of us and infiltrated the valley. They opened the gate when the guards weren't paying attention and let people in. There were many people and they tried to steal from us. Everything happened too suddenly, and we didn't have time to resist before we were completely defeated. In the end, General Lang Lu was killed and Long Marsh Valley was taken over. We escaped from death and immediately came to report the sudden appearance of the Sichuan army, the death of his favorite general, and the theft of his provisions." This series of events happened one after another like dark clouds hanging over Pang Huang's head. He was first shocked, then he understood, and finally he was angry. His eyes swept over Xiao Su, his eyes sharp. Xiao Su, was this all part of your plan? His words were questioning, but his tone was certain. Xiao Su did not deny it. Prince of Nansong, you have set up so many schemes. Now you should have a taste of being schemed against. Pang Huang gave a cold laugh. So your provisions were not burned at all. Everything was just a diversion. That's right, Xiao Su admitted. Your goal is to steal my provisions and trap this prince? Pang Huang faintly felt that it was not that simple. Xiao Su lightly said, this is only a part of the plan. Pang Huang was stunned. What? At this moment, someone suddenly exclaimed, there's a fire over there. It seems to be the location of our army's camp. In this domineering and arrogant moment, other than the two people who were talking, the rest of the people were silent. So when the words were spoken, everyone heard it clearly. They all looked in the direction of the finger. Thick smoke billowed up. Not good. It's really coming from the direction of our barracks. One of the deputies turned pale with fright. The provisions were stolen, the generals were killed, and the barracks were attacked. This was like a bolt from the blue. Pang Huang didn't expect himself to turn from the hunter to the prey. However, his strong self-control prevented him from revealing a panicked expression like the soldiers beside him. Instead, he furrowed his brows and looked angrily at Xiao Su. His mind was already working at high speed as he tried to think of a way to escape. Xiao Su, you are indeed smart. It was my carelessness. Pang Huang could no longer maintain a calm facade, so he spoke bluntly. Xiao Su was indifferent. This prince wanted to say this to you during the battle in Jiangning County. And what are you going to do now? Pang Huang asked. There are two paths. 1, you put down your weapons and surrender. 2, we will beat you until you surrender. Different paths lead to the same destination. This prince believes that the crown prince will make the best choice. Xiao Su raised his chin, his killing intent rising. Surrender? Haha, there is no such word in this prince's life. When he finished speaking, Pang Huang restrained his expression. His eyes were like knives. Generals, listen to my order. Kill. The sonorous and forceful words ignited the anger of the southern Song army. They immediately rushed towards the Sichuan soldiers. Xiao Su had already expected that Pang Huang wouldn't surrender so easily. He made a hand gesture, and the soldiers who had been eyeing the southern Song army for a long time couldn't wait to meet them. The hatred of occupying the country, the hatred of having one's family destroyed, the pain of being homeless. At this moment, all of it exploded, carrying the heavy responsibility of the country, taking revenge for their families, and being hot-blooded for themselves. Sichuan soldiers harbored 1,000 words of hatred and bitterness. They turned it into swords in their hands and unstoppably rushed towards the southern Song army. Who told you to destroy my country? Who told you to kill my friends and family? Who told you to harm me to this extent? There was no enmity between us, but because of your selfish desires, you harmed others and yourself. We will never forgive you. Waves of killing and a sea of blood surged. Sichuan's army was besieged from both inside and outside. They only had twice the manpower of the southern Song army, but the situation was quickly turning one-sided. Pang Huang watched as his side retreated step by step. They didn't have the strength to fight back, and he was full of doubts. Soon after, he thought of the reason. Just now, they were already surrounded by Sichuan's army. How did Lang Lu's subordinates get in? There was only one reason. Xiao Su deliberately let them in. It was to let them know that their provisions had been stolen. His goal was to disturb the morale of the army, and then let their main camp be attacked. This was the second strategy to attack the morale of the army. He couldn't help but look at Xiao Su. This person wasn't only good at scheming, he was also good at reading people's minds. Every move he made hit the weakest part of the human heart. If the morale of the army was unstable, then no matter how strong the soldiers were, they would all be defeated. No wonder Imperial Father warned him to be careful of Xiao Su before he led the army. The previous few times he won, it was only because there were spies in the army. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult for him to scheme against him. At this moment, a pair of black boots appeared in his vision. He couldn't help but slowly raise his head, only to see Xiao Su standing in front of him with a sword in hand. He chuckled. Even though he was in a dangerous situation, he still had the calm demeanor of a country's crown prince. His Royal Highness. Could it be that he's still thinking about the bet from before? Xiao Su lightly pulled the corner of his mouth, his eyes indifferent. That's not it. Chu Yin isn't a commodity that can be casually used as a wager. If you want to recruit talents, courtesy is the most important thing. So on this point, you've lost. Pang Huang's expression became very ugly. He was a person who valued and treated talents with courtesy. Therefore, he had many aides in the Southern Song Army. Now, with just one sentence from Xiao Su, he had rejected all his efforts in the past. Is that so? Then why were you willing to accept when this crown prince made the bet? In fact, in your heart, Chu Yin is only a chess piece in your hand. Now it's just an excuse for you to attack this crown prince. In this way, Chu Yin is also very pitiful. Xiao Su looked at him with pity. This king didn't accept the challenge just now. I just wanted to fight with you, that's all. He flew into a rage out of humiliation. His Royal Highness's eloquence is really good. This crown prince concedes defeat. There's no need to concede defeat. Right now, this prince wants you to pick up your sword and fight with this prince fair and square. Xiao Su raised his sword and pointed it at him, his eyes sharp. Pang Huang felt that Xiao Su still chose to fight him alone in this kind of situation. There seemed to be something wrong. Xiao Su, this isn't your style. Xiao Su didn't say anything and attacked first. Pang Huang immediately raised his sword to block. This prince wants to settle the debt of you injuring Chu Yin. Xiao Su's voice was as cold as ice. Pang Huang was shocked. This prince still needs your people to inform you, so I still have time to practice a few moves with you. In other words, Xiao Su is only fighting with him to delay the battle between the two armies while waiting for the Southern Blue people to report back. Pang Huang was shocked. This person was simply too frightening. He calculated everything perfectly. It was as if he could summon clouds and rain with a flip of his hand. Pang Huang forced himself to calm down. He had another question. You seem to care a lot about Chu Yin. She cared so much that she didn't hesitate to take action herself. Xiao Su's eyes were cold. He didn't want to talk to him anymore. You don't need to know this. Pang Huang choked and didn't continue to ask. However, he clearly understood that the situation wasn't optimistic. He knew that if this continued, he wouldn't be able to gain any benefits. There was even a possibility that the entire army would be wiped out. Therefore, his eyes narrowed, and he began to think of a way to escape. Then, as if Xiao Su saw through his thoughts, he flew over again. His footsteps were light as wind. In an instant, he was right in front of Pang Huang. Pang Huang had no choice but to draw his sword. At this time, the Southern Blue Army was retreating in defeat. There were countless casualties, and their numbers had been reduced by more than half. Pang Huang was disturbed by the people around him and didn't have the heart to continue fighting. He didn't grasp his last move well and was easily blocked by Xiao Su. Before he could react, his weakness was exposed in front of his opponent. Xiao Su attacked him with his palm. Pang Huang couldn't dodge in time and could only lean to the side to avoid being hit. However, the full force of the palm landed heavily on his chest, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. His entire body was like a kite with a broken string as he flew out. Seeing this, the Southern Blue Army's generals turned pale with fright. They quickly surrounded their prince and helped him up from the ground, asking anxiously. Pang Huang spat out a few more mouthfuls of blood. He struggled to raise his hand to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth. He felt the strength in his body rapidly drain away. His eyes were filled with hatred as he looked at Xiao Su, who was standing in the middle of the crowd. Under the sunlight, the silver light and the black robe fluttered in the wind. He was like a god of war from the heavens, sacred and inviolable. However, he was like a miserable speck of dust. Your Highness, this general swears to protect you and send you out safely. If this prince escapes, I will make proper arrangements for your family. Pang Huang's voice was weak, but his majesty was still there. Your subordinates will kowtow to your Highness once again. As soon as the words fell, one of the generals immediately gathered soldiers to block in front of them. They had the other small groups send Pang Huang out while they guarded the surroundings. Xiao Su saw that the Southern Blue Army was blocking in front of him, so he no longer fought Pang Huang alone. He ordered Huo Ling to lead people to intercept them. These people had already disregarded life and death and could be said to be undying death soldiers. They were ruthless and decisive. Even if there were several times more Sichuan soldiers, it would still be difficult to gain an advantage in front of them. Bit by bit, they were forced to the end of the encirclement. As for the soldiers protecting Pang Huang, they were like a snowball. From the beginning, they were gathered together and gradually grew stronger. In the end, they were chased by the Sichuan soldiers and slowly became smaller and smaller. Smoke filled the air and shouts of killing filled the air. After exhausting the lives of many soldiers, they finally broke through the encirclement. Pang Huang passed through the inseparable crowd and swept his gaze over his subordinates who had died on the battlefield. His cold gaze fell on the aloof Xiao Su, who was sitting on the back of a horse, his clothes not stained with blood. Xiao Su, I swear in the name of the Prince of Nansong, Pang Huang, that as long as I am alive, I will fight you to the death. After taking one last look, Pang Huang withdrew his gaze and coldly ordered, "Let's go." Huo Ling saw that Pang Huang had broken out of the encirclement and immediately turned to ask, "Master, should your subordinates lead people to chase after them?" "No need. Don't chase after a cornered enemy." Xiao Su knew that the people beside Pang Huang were the secret guards that he had personally trained. Their martial arts were not below the fierce cavalry. Now that they had killed to protect their master, if he sent people to chase after them, the gains would not make up for the losses. His palm strike just now had almost taken away half of Pang Huang's life. If he did not receive timely treatment, he would not have long to live. Thus, he turned around and commanded the battlefield. Without their commander, the morale of the soldiers was slack. The Southern Song army was defeated like a landslide and was quickly subdued by Xiao Su. Xiao Su ordered people to clean up the battlefield. After half an hour, Feng Lu came to report, "Your Highness, our army lost 3,000 men and 4,000 were injured. As for the 3,000 captives, other than those who escaped, the rest died on the battlefield." This time, the number of casualties was the least. He still had to wait for information about the attack on the Southern Song army camp. "Very good. Withdraw the troops and return." Chapter 964. The Sichuan army had not won a single battle in such a long time. Now, they could finally hold their heads high and march forward in high spirits. Although after Xiao Su regained control of the three armies, the soldiers of Xixian had regained some morale from their defeats, but what really gave them confidence was that they had turned the tables around. Now, their morale was really different. Xiao Su was affected by everyone's mood, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but rise. At this time, reports of victory came in one after another. Jin Xian not only seized all of the Southern Song's frontline provisions, but also captured many Southern Song soldiers. Gao Hao and Jing Guanghui not only beat the Southern Song army to a pulp, but also rescued the soldiers captured by the Southern Song army. In this battle, the firewood under the cauldron was removed. It was simply a beautiful fight. Therefore, standing in the camp, Chu Qingyin and the others returned to the high-spirited army, as well as the peerless silver-clothed war god in the crowd. Chu Qingyin guessed the result when she saw that everyone was beaming with joy despite their injuries. Although she wanted to fly into his arms, she didn't forget the occasion. She resisted the impulse and welcomed him with a smile. There were many people left in the camp, but Xiao Su saw a red-clothed person behind the crowd at a glance. As the commander, he couldn't leave at will. When he came back, he was surrounded by soldiers. He couldn't immediately go to her side, so he could only pass a reassuring smile across the crowd, telling her that he was all right. Chu Qingyin also smiled at him across the crowd. Suddenly, at this moment, she finally understood the feeling of missing and Hongdo to the bone. She didn't know what kind of feeling it was. He was clearly close at hand, but she already missed him to the extreme. Love can make people selfish, but it can also make people learn to be patient. Chu Qingyin stared at the person who was surrounded by stars, and a kind of pride grew in her heart. This was the person she adored. He was indomitable, he was peerless, and most importantly, he loved her equally. Cheng Yinluo stood beside her and looked at her. Ever since Xiao Su appeared, her eyes could no longer contain anyone else. Her eyes were filled with envy. The happiest thing in life was to meet someone in the vast sea of people. The one who knew each other was the one who fell in love with each other in the end. She found him, but he didn't last until the end. The corners of her mouth curled up as she placed a hand on the little fellow's shoulder. She chuckled softly and said, "Little girl, your future husband is a peerless hero." Chu Qingyin could not help but blush. Although she was shy, she still nodded and firmly admitted, "Yes, he is a hero, my hero." In the past, when she watched Stephen Chow's movies, there was a scene where the female lead believed that an unparalleled hero would come to pick her up on a rainbow cloud. At that time, she only smiled and did not take it seriously. In her world, this kind of love did not exist. However, in this place, she experienced what it was like to be filled with happiness and what it felt like to have a strong arm that she could rely on. Cheng Yinluo smiled gently. "So, little girl, you must grasp the happiness in your hands and live happily ever after." Chu Qingyin nodded heavily. "I will, Yinluo. You will too. Please believe in me." Cheng Yinluo was slightly stunned. Could she still have happiness? She did not know the answer to this question. She wanted to brush it off, but when she looked into the pair of clear eyes in front of her, she nodded. Okay. She decided to comfort her for the time being. After waiting for a while, Chu Qingyin realized that Big Ice Cube was still not free. Chu Qingyin thought for a while and decided to go back. She thought that after such an intense battle, Big Ice Cube must be feeling very uncomfortable. Therefore, she decided to do what she could. When she finished boiling water in the tent, she heard the sound of unhurried footsteps. She was very familiar with these footsteps. She turned around abruptly and saw the person standing inside the tent. He had broad shoulders and a lean waist. Dressed in a silver battle robe, he was tall and slender. He was like a ray of white light that descended from the sky. She was simply dazzled. The two of them stood 6 to 7 steps away from each other. Neither of them spoke. They had not seen each other for a day, but it felt like 3 autumns. "What? Don't you recognize me?" Xiao Su was the first to speak. There was a smile in his voice. Hearing this familiar voice and seeing that the person was standing in front of her, Chu Qingyin's eyes started to heat up. She couldn't help but raise her hand to wipe her eyes. She smiled as tears flowed down her cheeks. "Even if you are in disguise or old, I could still recognize you. What's wrong? Did you not close the curtain properly and let the sand in?" Xiao Su felt wronged. He felt that it was impressive that the sand could enter her eyes. Finally, he smiled and opened his arms. He looked at her affectionately. "Come here." Chu Qingyin was still immersed in the thought of crying in front of the big ice block. He would definitely look down on her. When she heard him suddenly speak, she did not react in time. Her face was blank. "What? Do what you wanted to do before." Xiao Su looked at her with a smile. Chu Qingyin immediately understood. She did not care about being reserved anymore. 3 steps turned into 2 steps, and she threw herself into his arms. When Xiao Su approached, he retracted his arms and hugged her tightly. On this day, his empty heart was finally filled. When he was fighting enemies on the battlefield, he could be calm and unruffled. Every step he took was calculated. When he defeated the enemy, he could still be indifferent. He could see the situation clearly before making a plan. However, these were all his duties, and he had never felt that there was anything to be proud of or complacent about. However, when he returned in triumph and saw the figure of his beloved standing under the tree, waiting for him with joy in her eyes, he suddenly found his own meaning for all of this. It turned out that everything was very simple. In order to protect her, in order to ensure her safety in the future. Thus, everything had new meaning. "How did you know that I wanted to do this at that time?" Chu Qingyin hugged him tightly. Although her cheeks were a little painful from the armor, she knew that she was not dreaming. "Because I can see your eyes." She did not know when it started, but his gaze would often involuntarily stay on her body. Later, it slowly became a habit. Later on, as long as she revealed her emotions, he would be able to see through them. Chu Qingyan heard this and hugged him tightly. This sentence was more lethal than sweet words. Congratulations, Big Ice Cube. You've dealt a heavy blow to the enemy. Congratulations on successfully taking back 2 more cities. From the discussion with the soldiers just now, she knew that after being sent to attack the Southern Blue Camp, they had taken back 2 lost cities. She was sincerely happy for him. This heartwarming congratulation with a sweet smile made him feel more comfortable and happy than the cheers outside. It seemed that he was in a hurry to come back, just to wait for her praise. Xiao Su lowered his head and kissed her lips. It was as if she was his reward, and he was very satisfied. Chapter 965. One must enjoy life to the fullest. For example, at this moment, Xiao Su was not happy because he had won the battle, but because someone was waiting for him when he returned. When he entered the military camp when he was young, with his meticulousness and aptitude, he had never let the other party gain an advantage over him. Thus, to him, victory or defeat was the norm for a military strategist, and there was no need for him to invest too much in it. However, today, he finally tasted what it meant to be as if he had found a treasure, all because his efforts were worth it. He tightened his grip on her soft body and deepened the kiss. Since he was young, the heavens had constantly arranged for him to endure hardships and bear responsibilities that did not belong to him at his age, just so that he could go through hardships and meet this little fellow in front of him. Then he would gladly endure all these years of pain. Chu Qingyan could feel his inner emotions from his strength. She could not help but let go of herself, no longer reserved, and accompanied him to enjoy this moment of joy. When they finally separated, Chu Qingyan's legs turned to jelly, and she almost fell. Fortunately, Xiao Su supported her and muttered to himself, "As expected, your body is still too weak." Chu Qingyan had just stabilized herself, and she almost fell again because of his words. Xiao Su could not help but laugh. Chu Qingyan blushed from his teasing, and she flung his hand away and said angrily, "Hurry up and take a shower. You're all sweaty, and you stink." Xiao Su grabbed her wrist and pulled her in front of him and said innocently, "Is that so? But when I hugged you just now, you didn't even look down on me." Chu Qingyan blushed and lowered her eyes. How could the big ice cube ask such a question? It was too much. Feeling her shyness, Xiao Su chuckled and raised his hand to hold her chin and lifted it slightly, making her look into his eyes. At the corner of her eye, there was a red mark on his armor. It was like a bright red flower petal, making it hard for him to look away. He couldn't help but have a thought. He lowered his head and gently kissed the corner of her eye, feeling especially tender. Chu Qingyan felt as though her heart was being filled with a sea of warmth. She closed her eyes tightly, and her eyelashes trembled. Finally, she slowly opened her eyes as he called out to her softly, "Ian, Pang Huang hurt you. I've already paid him back for you." Xiao Su's tone was the same as usual. He didn't ask for credit, nor was he complacent. It was as if he was describing an ordinary matter. Chu Qingyan was stunned at first, but then she understood what he meant. She blinked. "You mean Pang Huang is injured?" "Okay." Xiao Su nodded. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but smile. She pounced on him again, unable to suppress the joy in her heart. It wasn't because of Pang Huang's injuries that made her happy, but because she was touched that someone had stood up for her when she was bullied. "Big ice cubes are so good. You don't dislike me now?" She shook her head in his arms. "Big ice cubes don't stink. They don't stink at all. We smell good." Xiao Su couldn't help but smile. He reached out and hugged her. The two of them were lovey-dovey for a while. Xiao Su was urged to wash up. After calming down, Chu Qingyan was bored. She sat on a chair and flipped through the Heart Sutra that her beautiful master had left for her. The sword moves that her beautiful master had practiced for her. Because of her body, she couldn't practice with a sword yet. However, she recalled them in her mind. Very quickly, those sword moves were engraved in her mind. It had to be said that this Heart Sutra was very useful for martial artists. She had only practiced the first section, but she already felt a warm current flowing through her body. Every time it passed through a meridian, she felt comfortable, as if something had been opened. The injury on her chest also didn't seem to be that uncomfortable. She was in a very good mood. She continued to immerse herself in reading the Heart Sutra. Then, she closed her eyes and circulated another cycle. Xiao finished washing up and came out. He saw the person sitting on the couch with her eyes closed. He stopped and leaned against a pillar to look at her. His eyes were like water. A simple and elegant face, a peaceful expression. Her black hair was tied up, revealing a swan-like neck. She was elegant and calm. She casually sat on the couch with her eyes closed. The corner of her mouth was slightly raised. It was like a beautiful picture. When he looked at her, his heart was peaceful. At this time, he felt that the slaughter and blood were no longer entangled in his heart like before. Because every time he finished a battle, he wanted to lock himself in a sealed space. He wanted to force himself to forget the blood that filled the sky, the billowing smoke, and the desperate slaughter. His master had told him that because he came into contact with this kind of situation too early, he developed a heart demon. Fortunately, his heart was firm and he didn't go crazy. If he wanted to let go of his heart demon, there was no way to rely on it. Everything depended on luck. At this time, he suddenly woke up. It seemed at this time he was no longer entangled by those things. It seemed that after meeting the little fellow, his state of mind became more and more peaceful. He was no longer as worried as before. Perhaps this was the chance that his master talked about. He couldn't help but raise the corner of his mouth and smile softly. His master was right. The little fellow was his salvation. When Chu Qingyin finished circulating her energy and opened her eyes, a night demon barged into her eyes. He was wearing a white inner robe and a black outer robe loosely covered with a black outer robe. He didn't use a belt to tie it up. His black hair fell on his shoulders, still dripping with water. He looked unrestrained, as if he was looking at an otherworldly visitor on a boat on the river. His green robe was unbuttoned, and he looked natural and unrestrained. It was rare to see him show such a natural and unrestrained side. Chu Qingyin was a little stunned. Big ice block, if you had an extra fan in your hand and a jug of wine at your waist, you would really be like an otherworldly visitor. Xiao smiled, expressing his helplessness towards a certain person's strange ideas. He then walked towards her. Chu Qingyin laughed mischievously. Seeing that his hair was still wet, she took a cloth towel from his side. When he sat down, she leaned over and carefully wiped his hair for him. After so many years, he had already gotten used to her preparing clothes for him. Occasionally, she would take care of his daily life on a whim, so he didn't stop her. Her slender and gentle fingers ran through his hair, making his tense nerves gradually relax. He lowered his head and saw the Heart Sutra spread out on the couch. He casually asked, "Can you understand the contents of the book?" Chu Qingyin was envious of his soft hair in her heart when she suddenly heard his question. She was a little confused. When she followed his line of sight, she realized that he was asking about the Heart Sutra. She smiled and nodded. The first few sections are relatively simple. I can understand them. However, the later sections seem to be more profound. I flipped through a few pages, and it was a little difficult to read. However, it's not that difficult to understand. Anyway, if I don't understand, I can still ask you for help. Xiao nodded. His master was right. The little fellow was a martial arts material. She was smart, and her comprehension ability was not bad. The light of the lantern, the soft whispers, and the soft smile. He couldn't help but think of 4 words. The years are peaceful. Chapter 966. Compared to the Sichuan's celebration, the Southern Blue Army was dismal. Pang Huang was rescued by his subordinates. When he was finally sent back, there were only 3 or 4 shadow guards by his side. He was seriously injured and vomited blood. As soon as they returned to the camp, everyone was in a mess. They looked for the military doctor and boiled water. It was a complete mess. The military doctor hurried in. He examined Pang Huang's injuries and immediately took out a secret medicinal pill for him to consume. When he checked Pang Huang's pulse, it had stabilized. He let out a heavy sigh. His Highness the Crown Prince's life is saved. On the side, Luo also felt relieved. He asked, "It's all thanks to the military doctor. When will His Highness wake up?" The military doctor touched his chin and looked troubled. His Highness suffered an extremely serious internal injury. Fortunately, this old man had the 9 transformations soul recovery pill to protect His Highness's heart. The medicine is already taking effect. It should take at least half a day for him to wake up. If he wants to recover completely, he needs to be nourished with medicine for at least 49 cycles. Luo was shocked. Then what about our plan? The military doctor shook his head. This old man doesn't understand marching and fighting. Hey, is His Highness awake? The military doctor's words attracted everyone's attention. They all looked at the bed. Pang Huang moved his fingers and slowly opened his eyes. He was a little confused for a moment, but he quickly recovered and sat up with difficulty. "Where is this?" "Your Highness, this is our temporary camp." Luo immediately stepped forward to support him. Pang Huang remembered his previous defeat. Anger surged in his heart. His blood was not flowing smoothly, and he quickly coughed again. The military doctor quickly said, "Your Highness the Crown Prince, please don't be angry. Otherwise, your blood may flow backwards. Think about it, and keep a calm mind." When the military doctor finished speaking, several generals echoed. Pang Huang's head was a little dizzy. He frowned. "Shut up." The tent, which had been bustling with noise, suddenly quieted down. Pang Huang calmed down and raised his hand to touch his forehead. "What time is it now? How's the army?" "It's already 9 in the morning. Our men have suffered heavy losses. The 80,000 soldiers we sent out today were either killed or captured. The army was ambushed. Apart from those who died in battle, there are still 220,000 of them." Hearing this number, Pang Huang's face turned frightening, and his eyes turned red. When he had come to Sichuan from the southern Blue Continent, he had brought 400,000 soldiers with him. When he had fought with Xiao Ran, he hadn't lost many soldiers. But now he had lost more than 100,000 soldiers in a single confrontation with Xiao Su. This simply made people want to tear Xiao Su into pieces. Pang Huang swallowed the blood in his throat and clenched his fists. "Xiao Su, I didn't die on the battlefield, which means that I'm not fated to die. Now, it's my turn to collect my debt from you. For the sake of these 100,000 soldiers, I'll let you have a taste of destruction. Men, bring me the map." No one dared to disobey Pang Huang's order. Soon, the map of Sichuan was spread out in front of Pang Huang. "Where is Sichuan's army now?" Pang Huang asked coldly. "It's near Longshan County and Qingqiao City. It's more than 15 kilometers away from Longshan County and Qingqiao City," one of the soldiers replied. "Good. Qingcheng. If you were Xiao Su, which city would you go to?" Pang Huang covered his mouth and coughed lightly. Qingcheng stepped forward and walked to the map. After thinking for a moment, he said, "If Sichuan's army intends to go to Longshan County, they must pass through a river. However, there have been several heavy rains recently, causing the water level to rise and the current to be rapid. It's not suitable for boats. This one feels that they definitely won't take this risk." This one also thought of something. Among the captives rescued by Sichuan, there was a deputy general of Qingqiao City. Therefore, this one believes that they should be heading to Qingqiao City. After Qingcheng finished his analysis, Pang Huang nodded. "You're right. Sichuan just won a battle and seriously injured our army. They won't take risks now and will probably choose to advance steadily." After thinking for a moment, Pang Huang raised his head and swept his gaze over the crowd. "Who is the current general of Qingqiao City? How many men and horses are there currently?" Luo stepped forward and replied, "It's General Fuyu. He currently has 10,000 soldiers and horses." Pang Huang made a sound of acknowledgement. Then, his gaze landed on one of the generals in the tent. Although his face was pale and his voice was weak, the prestige he had accumulated over a long period of time instantly filled the tent. "Fengchen, do you know your crime this time?" The one who was named was the general who had led the troops to sneak attack the provisions that Jean Xin was escorting. Ever since he learned that the provisions that were burned were only a trick of Sichuan's, he began to tremble with fear. He was afraid that His Highness the Crown Prince would hold him accountable. Now, the thing he worried about had finally happened. Feng Chen's legs went soft, and he knelt down. Your Highness the Crown Prince, this subordinate knows his mistake. In fact, although Xiao Su's scheme this time was very meticulous and flawless, if his people had been a little more careful, they wouldn't have suffered such heavy losses this time. Seeing Feng Chen admit his crime, Pang Huang had the urge to kill him with 1,000 cuts. However, after falling into the trap this time, the morale of the army was already lax. If he punished the general, the morale of the army would be even more unstable. Pang Huang could only let him go for now. You deserve death for this crime. Unfortunately, we need people at this time, so I'll keep this score in mind. Now, I'll give you a chance to atone for your crimes. I'll give you 30,000 soldiers and horses. Go to Qingqiao City and support Fuyu. Feng Chen, who was originally kneeling and waiting for death, didn't expect that His Highness the Crown Prince would give him a chance. He kowtowed in gratitude. Thank you, Your Highness the Crown Prince. Thank you, Your Highness the Crown Prince. Pang Huang was very impatient. When he saw him, he waved his hand and ordered him to go and prepare. Then, Pang Huang began to give orders to assign tasks. Now that the casualties were heavy, he had to appease all sides. Thus, one by one, he arranged for the generals to be assigned. After another general left, only Rei Luo and Qing Cheng were left in the accounting room. Pang Huang took the tea to moisten his thirsty throat. Then, he looked at the two confidants in front of him with a heavy gaze. This crown prince is very unwilling to be defeated by Xiao Su this time. I must get back at him. Xiao Su and the others can only be proud for a while. They won't be proud forever, Rei Luo comforted. Pang Huang snorted and took a deep breath. Then, with a bloodthirsty expression, he said, This time, I'll use Qingqiao City as bait. This crown prince will make Xiao Su unable to return. Your Highness the Crown Prince already has a brilliant plan? Qing Cheng asked in surprise. That's right. This crown prince remembers that I brought a lot of gunpowder to Sichuan this time. Now it can be considered to be put to use. When the time comes, this crown prince will learn from Zhuge and use the empty city strategy. Let's see if he dares to accept the challenge. Pang Huang smiled coldly. Before Rei Luo could react, Qing Cheng had already guessed the crown prince's plan. No wonder the crown prince wanted Feng Chen to defend the city. It turned out that he didn't want him to perform meritorious deeds, but to accept his death. Chapter 9:67. The next day, Sichuan main tent. A map of Sichuan was spread out in the middle of the tent. Xiao Su stood in front of it, his finger pointing upwards. Our army is currently in this position. What do you all think we should do next? Gao Hao stroked his beard with a serious expression. Your Highness, this general feels that the Southern Blue Army's strength has been greatly damaged. We should take advantage of our victory and pursue them. Qingqiao City is the closest to our army, so we can set our target there. First, we'll recover Qingqiao City, then move on to Jiasong County, on Long Harbor, and other cities. Gao Hao's words received the approval of the majority. As Chu Qingyin's body had recovered well, she also participated in the meeting today. She felt that Gao Hao's words made sense, so she added, The Southern Blue Army's commander is heavily injured, and they've lost nearly half of their troops. Their rations can't be replenished in time, so we should say that their morale is very low. We shouldn't give them time to breathe and take advantage of the situation to beat them up. This will allow us to achieve twice the result with half the effort. If we choose Qingqiao City, we'll be able to tear a hole in their defenses. She had studied the Southern Blue Army's defenses. Currently, Qingqiao City was the outermost line of defense. If they could break through this line, then it would be much easier to recover the other cities. That's right, Your Highness. We've rescued Qingqiao City's Deputy General, Xing Cheng. He's very familiar with Qingqiao City. We can understand the current situation through him and discuss how to seize the city. Jing Guanghui stood out and suggested. Xiao Su nodded. Since no one has any objections, then we'll decide on Qingqiao City as our next target. Bring Xing Cheng in. We'll first understand the current situation of Qingqiao City. The meeting lasted until noon, when everyone was dismissed for lunch. They then decided to set off for Qingqiao City in the afternoon. In the end, only Xiao Su and Chu Qingyin were left in the tent. It was only today that Chu Qingyin saw Jean Xin in the tent after he bid farewell to her the last time. She felt that Jean Xin had been tanned recently, but he looked more energetic. However, his arms were tied with a white gauze, and there were a few cuts on his face. Chu Qingyin immediately felt her heart ache. She felt as if her own child had been raised well at home, but was beaten up when he went out. She felt a little upset. At this moment, only she and Big Ice Cube were left. She sighed and said with pity, "Seeing that Jean Xin is injured makes my heart ache." Xiao Su was in the middle of writing a memorial when he heard her words. He paused and looked up at her. If you want him to be successful, you have to be prepared for him to suffer and get hurt. Chu Qingyin snorted when she heard that. Of course you would think that way. Hualing and the others must have suffered a lot under your hands. Xiao Su's eyes were indifferent. I'm just teaching them the ability to survive. If they don't have the skills to dodge and seize the opportunity to attack, they will die sooner or later because of their own negligence. Also, didn't I come here like this? Big Ice Cube's words startled her. She couldn't help but fall silent. Although she had lived in this ancient era for so many years, she still had a modern mindset in her bones. This was a world where the strong preyed on the weak, not the peaceful 21st century. Xiao Su wrote a few words and realized that the person in front of him didn't speak. He looked up again and realized that she was standing there in a daze. He thought that his words were too harsh, so he muttered to himself for a moment. Jean Xin is injured, and you're so worried. If our child fell down when he went out, wouldn't you cry? Xiao Su's words carried a teasing smile. What the hell? Chu Qingyin immediately looked up and glared at him. The child hasn't been born yet. Is there a father who curses him like this? Wait, why was Big Ice Cube laughing so strangely? There seemed to be something wrong. You, who wants to give birth to your child? Her face instantly turned as red as the morning sun. After she said this, she saw the person sitting behind the table laugh even more. She felt the entire tent become hot. She stomped her feet and decided to ignore him. She gave a heavy snort and charged out of the tent, leaving the unrestrained laughter behind her. When Chu Qingyin came out, she almost bumped into Hualing, who was about to walk in. Hualing was originally in a rush, but when he saw the little princess face turn red and heard his master's laughter in the tent, he couldn't help imagining his master teasing the little princess. The scene was too beautiful, and he didn't dare think about it. "Young master, where are you going?" Hualing asked while holding back his laughter. How could Chu Qingyin not understand the smile in his eyes? She was about to explode in anger. It was fine if she was teased by Big Ice Cube, but now she was being teased by his subordinate. Life was too bitter. "It's nothing. What about you? Why are you in such a rush?" Chu Qingyin replied in an uncomfortable voice. With this reminder, Hualing finally remembered why he came here. His expression became a bit anxious. "Young master," this subordinate heard that Miss Chung was packing her luggage and was preparing to leave the camp. "I immediately came to report to you." Chu Qingyin was shocked. Yin Luo had only told her about this matter 2 days ago, and she never thought it would be so fast. She couldn't help feeling a bit anxious, but before this, she had some questions. Speaking of this, shouldn't Ethereal be the one worried about this matter? I remember that you and him are enemies, right? Why are you the one worrying about this? Hualing gave a deep sigh. That block of wood, only thinking about what's good for others. This subordinate can't stand him because he's always so selfless and doesn't think about himself. So, this subordinate wanted to go against him to see if he would be angry. Who would have thought that a block of wood would be a block of wood? No matter how I tormented him, he wouldn't care and would at most say a few words. If he fought with his subordinate to vent his anger, that would also be good. It's a pity that he doesn't understand. Hearing Hualing's sad words, Chu Qingyin's forehead couldn't help sweating. To have Ethereal fight with someone whose martial arts weren't on the same level as him, wasn't that just asking for a beating? If it was a competition of medical skills, Ethereal would probably be more willing. However, Huiling's words made Chu Qingyan have a whole new level of respect for him. She originally thought that he and Ethereal didn't like each other and liked to compare everything. Now that she heard it, there were actually other reasons. Perhaps this was what brothers were like. They normally teased each other and didn't like each other, but when something happened, they didn't even think about standing up for each other. This kind of relationship was even more enviable. She heard him continue. Miss Chung wants to leave, so Ethereal must be upset. It's just that he doesn't say anything. I can't stand his cowardly appearance, so I came to find young master and hope that you can persuade Miss Chung. Although this subordinate feels good seeing Ethereal upset, I still feel that he shouldn't be upset. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but sigh. These two people really make people worry. All right, I'll go check on Yin Luo. It's chaotic right now, and she's not alone. All right, then I'll have to trouble young master. Huiling rubbed his head and left with a grin. Chu Qingyan looked at his back and smiled, then turned and walked towards Yin Luo's tent. Chapter 968. When Chu Qingyan approached Chung Yinluo's tent, she happened to see her packing her luggage. Yin Luo, what are you doing? Chu Qingyan walked in front of Yin Luo and placed her hand on Yin Luo's bag. Chung Yin Luo smiled at her when she saw her. Didn't you see it? I plan to leave this place. You didn't even discuss it with me. If someone hadn't told me, would you have snuck away? Chu Qingyan sounded a little disappointed. Chung Yin Luo was silent for a moment. When she raised her head, her lips were already curled into a faint smile. Didn't you already know? Besides, didn't I tell you before? Yin Luo, there's a war outside. I don't feel at ease with a girl like you wandering around alone. You should at least wait for me to arrange for someone to escort you back. Otherwise, what should I do if something happens? Chu Qingyan sighed heavily at the end. Chung Yin Luo pursed her lips. Finally, she patted the little girl's arm and comforted her. I've been wandering outside for so many years. I can still protect myself. You don't have to worry about me. I don't believe that you can't even defeat me with your mediocre skills. Chu Qingyan huffed. A row of crows flashed across Chung Yinluo's head. Please, how could her martial arts be compared to hers? She was personally trained by Xiao and had so many training partners by her side. Of course, her martial arts were miles ahead of hers. However, she also knew that the little girl was being kind. She couldn't help but soften her tone. I'll have to leave sooner or later. It doesn't matter if I leave sooner or later. You don't have to keep me. Since Yin Luo had already put it this way, Chu Qingyan could not force her to stay any longer. Her idea of matchmaking Yin Luo and Kong Ling had fallen through. At this point, she took a step back. Fine, I won't stop you if you want to leave. However, you're going back to the medical center. When you reach Qingxiao City, I'll send someone to escort you back to the medical center. Otherwise, I won't feel at ease. During the previous battle with the Southern Blue Army, many of the Southern Blue soldiers had fled and were scattered in the vicinity. If Yin Luo were to travel alone, she would inevitably encounter them. For her safety, this was the only way. Seeing her determined expression, Chung Yin Luo had no choice but to compromise. She raised her hand and pinched her face to vent her anger. Forget it, forget it. I'm afraid of you, you wretched girl. Seeing that she was no longer in a hurry to leave, Chu Qingyan finally heaved a sigh of relief. At this time, she smiled. I brought you here. No matter what, I have to send you back safely. Otherwise, how can I live up to our years of friendship? Instead of saying that, I'd rather call you Manager Annie. You want to manage everything. You'll die of exhaustion sooner or later. Chung Yin Luo rolled her eyes at her, but her heart was filled with warmth. Chu Qingyan only smiled and didn't refute her words. She reached out and hugged Yin Luo's arm, sighing softly. If we part like this, I don't know when we'll meet again. That depends on when you'll beat the crap out of Southern Blue and make them piss their pants. Thinking that she wouldn't be able to see the little girl and the rest for a while, Chung Yin Luo felt a little reluctant to part. How can war be so easy? In the past, when I wasn't personally on the battlefield, I thought that as long as I had the right time, place, and people, I could quickly defeat the enemy. Only when I'm on the battlefield do I realize that it's very difficult to gather all three. Chu Qingyan sighed. Sheng Yin Luo couldn't help but feel sorry for her. It's been hard on you little girls. You bear the heavy responsibility of saving the country. I'll pray for you in my heart. Chu Qingyan smiled at her with curved eyes. Evil can't prevail over good. We'll win. Xishuan, the capital. Huwa Temple. Tathagata Buddha sat in the center of the temple with a serene expression. He held Buddhist prayer beads in his hand and looked at the underworld with pity in his eyes. Under the lotus seat, there was an elegant monk dressed in a green robe. He held Buddhist prayer beads in one hand and a wooden mallet in the other, looking at a wooden fish. The fragrance of sandalwood rose in spirals, and the sound of chanting could be heard. Just by standing here for a moment, one would feel that one's soul was clear and bright. The room was quiet. Apart from the low chanting and the sound of the wooden fish, there was no other sound. The heart was free of distracting thoughts. The 6 senses were pure, and the 4 elements were empty. At this moment, the little novice monk who usually followed him walked in and knelt on a futon. He stole a glance at the person beside him and then closed his eyes. "Bo Wang, have you finished your homework?" Su Jian asked. Bo Wang immediately opened his eyes wide. Beside him, his master's eyes were still closed. If he hadn't heard that question, he would have thought that his master hadn't said anything. Bo Wang said somewhat guiltily, I've finished. A monk doesn't lie. Let me ask you again. Have you really finished? Su Jian slowly opened his eyes and looked at him with a clear gaze. Bo Wang hurriedly prostrated himself. Bo Wang knows his mistake. Today, you'll be punished by copying the scriptures 3 times. You're not allowed to bargain, Su Jian said indifferently. Bo Wang's face was bitter. Yes, master. Su Jian looked at his scrunched-up little face and couldn't help but chuckle. This was the little disciple he'd taken in this year, and also his first disciple. Nansong invaded and seized cities, causing many people to lose their homes and become homeless. He'd picked up Bo Wang from the streets. His parents had both died at the hands of the Nansong people. Su Jian had originally wanted to ask someone to take care of him, but Bo Wang was afraid of strangers and didn't want to leave him. In addition, his eyes were very similar to the little girl who'd rejected him back then. He didn't know why, but he wanted to keep him. Bo Wang had been following him for half a year now. His temperament was unstable, and he was easily attracted by external things. However, he was still a child, so he could teach him slowly. After receiving his punishment, Bo Wang no longer felt burdened. He was only a 5 or 6-year-old child, so he immediately threw his worries to the back of his mind and asked in a childish voice, Master, that female benefactor you mentioned before, is she out of danger now? Su Jian's fingers paused as he fiddled with the prayer beads. His gaze fell on the snow-white porcelain bottle, and he slowly said, She's out of danger. He hadn't forgotten that he'd only divined that she was in danger, but not the outcome. For the next few days, he didn't forget to calculate again. It wasn't until early one morning that he calculated that she was safe. At this time, his fingers unconsciously closed together again. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed. Benefactor Chu was facing another calamity? Bo Wang kept looking at his master. When he saw that his master's expression wasn't right, he couldn't help but ask, Master, what's wrong? Su Jian looked at Bo Wang with a strange expression. I'm afraid that female benefactor you mentioned just now is about to meet another calamity. Master, why is she facing so many calamities? Bo Wang was very puzzled. Maybe it's because her identity isn't ordinary. Su Jian sighed. An outsider from outside the world had barged into this world that didn't belong to her. She was going against fate, so she faced endless calamities. However, Su Jian tapped his fingers again, as if something was wrong. Chapter 9:69. Su Jian sensed that something was amiss. While he was meditating, he didn't forget to mutter to himself, Master, what do you mean her identity is not ordinary? Will she still be in danger in the future? Perhaps because it was rare to see his master in such a difficult position, Bo Wang mustered up his courage to ask. Su Jian turned his gaze to Bo Wang, his eyes devoid of joy or sorrow. because some people belong here and some don't. Therefore, I can't divine this female benefactor's fate every time, because that's going against the heavens. But Wang was still young, so he didn't quite understand what his master meant. He tilted his head and asked, "Will the female benefactor leave this place in the future?" His master probably meant that she didn't belong here. Su Jian looked at the vast sky with rolling clouds outside the door, his expression blank. "I don't know either." The lives of the people around her had changed because of her appearance, so their fates were all messed up. It was hard to divine what kind of person they would be in the future. This was especially so for Xiao Su. He should have passed away a few years ago, but because of Chu Qingyin's appearance, the trajectory of his life changed. He did not die, and the star that belonged to him became brighter and brighter. It was almost as bright as the Emperor's star. To Xishuan, he didn't know whether this was good or bad. But one thing was for sure, his existence was a blessing to the common people. He actually had something to ask his master about. Buwang blinked and asked, "Will the female benefactor encounter any more danger?" Su Jian's gaze fell on him, a solemn look in his eyes. "Yes. In the near future, she will encounter a life and death calamity." But just like before, he couldn't divine whether she would succeed in overcoming the calamity. Was he not capable enough? Or was this really something difficult to divine? He couldn't help but recall what she had said to him back then. "My fate is in my own hands, not in the hands of the heavens." This was an extraordinary woman. He didn't know how much she had grown after so many years. But Wang was a little anxious when he heard this. Will anything happen to her? Perhaps because he had suffered the loss of his family, but Wang subconsciously didn't want others to be hurt like him. Su Jian placed his hand on his head and smiled faintly. "The heavens are benevolent. She has experienced so many life and death situations. I believe she will be able to turn misfortune into blessing." Buwang nodded repeatedly. Su Jian raised his head slightly and looked into the distance. "You've been creating miracles, so keep it up." After 2 days, the army finally climbed mountains and waded through rivers. They arrived in a forest 10 li away from Qingqiao City and set up camp there. Reporting to the general, according to the spies, there were originally only 10,000 guards in the city. Now, there are 30,000 more reinforcements. A soldier reported, "Looks like this prince of Nansong also predicted that we would attack Qingqiao City first." Fong Lu expressed his opinion. Gao Hao felt quite confused. Since they knew that we would come here, why did they only send 30,000 reinforcements? This doesn't make sense. Jing Guanghui replied, "Maybe it's because they couldn't fight back after being beaten by us last time. Now that they have no time to spare, they can only send these people." Everyone nodded, feeling that it made sense. At this moment, Xiao Su asked, "Who's the general guarding the city now?" Xing Cheng, the deputy general of Qingqiao City, stepped forward and replied, "Originally, there was one called Fu Yu. Now, there's another called Feng Chun." As soon as he finished speaking, Jin Xin also stepped forward. "This Feng Chun, I fought with him at 7 Mile Cliff. He's a bit of a grandiose person." Xiao Su looked at Xing Cheng. "You're more familiar with the city. Analyze the terrain first." Xing Cheng was already prepared. He immediately said, "Because Qingqiao City is surrounded by mountains on both sides, there are only city gates on the east and west. Because of the mudslide a few years ago, the officials in charge of Qingqiao City built the city walls very high. Thus, it's not suitable for sneak attack. We can only force our way in from the outside." Xiao Su nodded, his mind working quickly. Then he said, "Who's willing to attack the city this time?" As soon as he finished speaking, Fong Lu, Xing Cheng, and Jin Xin all stepped forward. "Your subordinates are willing to lead the troops to attack the city." Chu Qingyin glanced at Jin Xin's injured arm, a little worried. Xiao Su looked at them with satisfaction. After a while, he ordered, "Fong Lu is experienced in battle. As the main general, Xing Cheng, you're familiar with Qingqiao City. You'll be the deputy general to assist Fong Lu. Jin Xin, you're new to the army. Although you haven't been in the army for long, you're good at adapting. This time, you'll be the deputy general to assist Fong Lu." The three of them bowed and accepted the order. Your subordinates obey. With the plan and personnel confirmed, Xiao Su ordered people to make preparations. After recuperating, they could attack the city the next day. It was already close to night. Other than the sound of soldiers moving about, there was only the sound of cicadas and frogs croaking. In such a forest, the sounds rose and fell without stopping. Chu Qingyan stood at the edge of the tent, looking up at the full moon above her head thoughtfully. After standing for a while, her legs felt a little numb. When she withdrew her gaze, she saw a familiar figure from the corner of her eye. She composed herself and met a pair of deep and serene eyes. She couldn't help but curve the corners of her mouth. He was the frozen autumn moon in the forest. He was the pearl of the night. Just by standing there, he was a scenery that people couldn't look away from. She wanted to walk towards him, but saw him give a few instructions to the guards beside him, then slowly walk towards her. It was already the beginning of summer, and the air was hot and dry. However, she watched him walk over, the corners of his clothes moving without wind. His black hair fluttered behind his back. Every step he took was so unhurried, carrying the clear glow of the moonlight. It was like a refreshing wind blowing in her face. People couldn't help but want to hold their breath, afraid to disturb this picturesque scene. When he walked in front of her, she still hadn't regained her senses. The silver armor in front of her, under the moonlight, reflected the warm light. She couldn't help but raise her head to look at him. Stunned, Xiao Su raised his eyebrows slightly. The little fellow's dazed look was ignorant and cute. It really made people want to hug her and ravage her. Big Ice Cube, have you heard of the Book of Songs? There's a saying that goes, if there's a bandit gentleman, it's like comparing notes. Under the light of the leaves, under the layers of shadows, the person standing there was bright and moving. She was charming and charming. Her starry eyes were bright and rippling. She was dressed in red men's clothing, but it couldn't hide her splendor. Only she was smiling unknowingly. Xian Mo's eyes slowly deepened. Under the moonlight, there was a glazed light, making people unable to see his true expression. He was thinking, if only they weren't in the military camp. He wanted to kiss her eyes. I'm very happy that you're praising me. He curled his lips. Chu Qingyan was stunned when she heard this. Then she said in a bad mood, "Where's your face?" Others praising him and him praising himself were two different concepts. All right. Xiao Su smiled and instantly looked at the person in front of him. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.